Okay, my name is Kristen Aro, co-chair of the Warner's Pond Task Force, and I'm calling this public meeting to order at 6:02. I'll take a roll call of the task force members. Why don't we start with you, Malcolm?
Malcolm Bryant. Paul Bohm.
Kristen Aro,
Keith Hannon. Mark Howell. Bruce Gross.
Vicky Alani.
Rachel Freed, CBI.
Toby Berkman, CBI.
Selection Father, Dawn of Concord.
Jeff Collins.
Lily Kay.
is there anyone online? I can't.
Jeff Quick and
Jeff quit Department of Corrections.
Okay,
Bert is here too, sorry, online.
okay, all right, then.
And Seth.
Chris.
I made it, there we go.
Sorry.
Good.
You made it.
All right, I bet we'll have a couple more trickle in. Okay, so our main goal for tonight's meeting is to hear the dam removal proposal and provide feedback. And then to clarify our next steps for the task force on public input and other related issues that we have. And you can see the agenda up on the screen. So it's a pretty packed agenda. We will open the meeting to public comment in a few minutes. But the meeting is being recorded and a video link. And also we'll have public comments at the end of the meeting as well. The meeting is being recorded and a video link will be posted to the task force website in a few days. So first thing, do we have a motion to approve the October 29, 2024 minutes?
I had one I'll second that, but I have one comment on it, just a really tiny correction. On page 5, under the section about where the readouts, it mentions that I reported that the on the dam, the lower elevation of the sluiceway, and it says 15 feet, it should be 115 feet. And then the rest of it is correct.
Right.
Okay. So then, so do we have a motion to approve the October 29, 2024 meetings with the amendment?
And a second, we got a second.
So we have a second.
Yeah.
So all those in favor? We have to go around. So we'll start with Malcolm again.
Aye. Paul's aye.
Chris is aye.
Keith is aye. Sven is aye.
Mark, I.
Vicky, I. Jeff
And Jeff.
Aye.
And then
And David Owen is online.
David. Okay, great. Thank you. So the minutes are approved as written with the one amendment
As amended.
as amended. Perfect. Thank you very much. So since Bill is not here tonight, so we'll have public comments at the beginning of the meeting, for those who are interested. I'll go through the ground rules again. Please be respectful in your comments, avoid personal attacks, and please keep comments to no more than 2 minutes. Do we have anybody here that would like to have a public comment?
And see it.
Miguel?
I'm Miguel Echevarri, homeowner at 255 Commonwealth Ave, abutting the pond. So I own a small data company, so data is important to me. One of the concerns that I have about the possible report coming up is how much it might reference the alternative analysis report, which I've been trying to get some answers on, asking questions about. And I think if the report that's going to be presented to us does have a lot of references. Oh, was something?
I just mentioned that the video, it's not working on the meeting. So they should be able to hear you on Zoom, but they can't see us.
Oh.
Yeah, maybe. step forward.
Video on.
So the video for the meeting room, yeah, it was working before.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Miguel.
It's okay.
Down below it says on.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah. Okay. Alright, so anyways, you got the intro of what I was gonna say, so I have some concerns about the alternative analysis report and because it may be getting used in this report, I think it's relative. So I think that anything that refers to that report needs to be taken with a grain of salt, because we need to consider what that report did. The report had estimated the cost of dam removal between $2.5 and $3.3 million. But it was $1.1 million, so that's a large deficit, and it overstated the benefits, or the benefits were non-existent, so like the storm surge or the flood control, you remove the dam, you still have the bridge, so just like on Pine Street, you will still have the flooding of the area, so that was a benefit that didn't come forth. The fish migration, that's a topic of some debate right now, but apparently it looks like fish can migrate up there with minor modifications based on what was presented by officials from the state. And also too, the alternative analysis report also didn't present a viable dredge plan. Okay, because it never referred to the second MCI site. It never even mentioned the second MCI site. So I want us all to consider kind of those, what I would consider as a data guy, serious shortcomings within the report, and just to be cautious whenever the upcoming report does refer to information from that report. And finally, we were all pushed on the benefits of dam removal. As we all know, it was a little bit contentious and such. And a lot of those now have been, are no longer viable, So what I would hope to see in this report coming up is a specific section that does outline what the revised benefits are, so tell us what the benefits are. So anyways, that's my 2 minutes, I think.
Thank you very much, Miguel.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other comments here? Online?
Anna
see.
Selwyn and Allison Ailey.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
Say your name.
Mary Weinberg, Hillside Avenue. In 2018, the town voted to buy as it says, authorized acquisition of 369 Commonwealth Avenue and adjacent properties on Warner's Pond. Warner's Pond was to be the focal point and key element from the inception of Jarrell Park. As you can see in the slide they held up at town meeting, you see the pond. It was a key element. Then there was, after the town voted on it, for $2.5 million. As you can see, another slide at town meeting, it shows the blue is the pond. All of the voters at town meeting saw the property and the pond. That's why we spent $2.5 million for this pond, anticipation of having it. After that, there was a community meeting held with the rec, and I'm not going to go over names now. It was everybody from town and the people we hired, and the meeting was held on the property with quotes, with a spectacular view of Warner's Pond. It's a minutes of the meeting, community meeting number 1 by GPI. And here they have their slides where they show open views to water, create boat launch. This is what we spent much money to hire a consultant, talking about how we're going to use the pond for Jarrell Park. This is all for Jarrell Park. I remind you of Joanne Loyne, who worked feverishly to save Warner's Pond. She worked with Dan Monahan, the town paid for it. We must not forget these people who did this work in the past. We must not forget the report from 1983, which Nate Smith put online now. You can all find it. It's the West Concord Center study. It talks about the importance of water views in West Concord. It was done. Look at how thick it is. It's online. You can find it at Google Concord Records, West Concord Center Study, 1983. You can read everything. I think we all have to be up to date with the history before we make a decision. I find we're not. I find many people don't know the history. The last thing is, I'm going to be there this Sunday at Warner's Pond between 3 and 4:30. A spectacular view of the sunset. I'm going to have this. It represents the reflection we see when the sun sets, which I personally, I don't know about anybody else. I need this. I need this water to reduce stress. I need this water for the beauty. And so if anybody else feels like I do, come down between 3 and 4:30, sit with me. I'm going to have a chair and watch the beauty of Warner's Pond which I can't get into, Walden Pond in the summer, it's too crowded. You have to be a member for White's Pond and it's overloaded. This is free. This is for me. I don't know about the rest of you, but living here 45 years, I was so excited to have this and I hope we can still have it. I want the pond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we appreciate your comments. Any other comments online?
Allison Ailey.
Allison?
I'm here. My video is not. Okay, there we
There
go.
you are.
Yeah.
Here I am. I'm gonna read this. My name's Allison Ailey. I live at 47 Warner Street. I have 2 points, one short and one long, but all around 2 minutes. I tried really hard to make it under. I don't know, I might go over. So my first point is my strong opinion that this task force has no legitimate business purpose conducting a survey at this stage in the process. My second point, if you do disagree and decide you're going to move forward with a survey, I strongly advise you not to do that until this task force holds a public meeting where members of the public can come and ask their questions and actually have them answered for the first time in the almost 2 years since the NRC pivoted from dredging the pond to removing the dam. Asking the public in a survey about what they want without first correcting the misinformation about why the NRC pivoted to dam removal is unconscionable and irresponsible. Since January, the discussion about everything related to Warner's Pond has not been reported in the Bridge. The revelations about the questionable bid process, the fact that there was always a much cheaper way to dispose of dredged material, the myth about dam removal increasing recreational opportunities and leaving us with a navigable and accessible stream, the fact that our dam will not qualify anytime soon for funds to take it down, the fact that the town already voted to dredge and allocated money to dredge, all need to be out there in the general public's mind before you ask them what they want through a survey. We all know that most Concordians want the town to responsibly spend money that's been voted on for legitimate town purposes. The town voted to dredge Warner's Pond, the town's largest and most accessible open water recreational and wildlife viewing area. So please, whether or not you do a survey, have a public meeting and actually answer everyone's questions and provide them with the real information that this task force has worked so hard to uncover. Then, if you really want to do a survey, you might actually get informed and thoughtful answers to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison, for that. Okay, any other comments? Okay, thank you all very much. We appreciate your comments. Okay. I will turn it over to Toby to introduce the dam removal group.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for the comments. So we're gonna hand it over, I think, to Jeff. Are you gonna run this? And you're able to get it out?
Been nominated to speak.
Great. So just, to tee this up for folks, I think we've had a number of these presentations at this point, so the group is pretty familiar with what we're trying to do here. But this is the second presentation from the dam removal group, right? They've come back now with a more refined proposal. So, I think our job here is just to, hear what they have to say, see if there are any further improvements, right, that you think could be made. And, if not, right, then this can be the proposal, right? I think it's at the stage that we're at right now. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna hand it to Jeff.
All right, the first.
Yeah, please,
I
Paul.
can just say, in case anybody's viewing this recording for the first time, dam removal is one of 3 alternatives being
Yeah.
considered by the task force. Just want to kind of
Oh, yeah,
Sure that's
yeah,
out
when I
there.
did the
Yeah,
alternative,
good
I mean, from this particular work group, we'd have
Right.
two other work groups that have also
Yeah.
come forward.
Just for any newcomer to the.
It's a really good.
Good point.
So
Yeah,
appreciate
at the
that.
beginning of each of our breakout meetings, we've had a few people join by Zoom and we reiterate that this is one committee of the full group here. The others being dredging and short-term solutions. Each of those committees will come back with a proposal for the whole group and then we'll all weigh those against our agreed criteria. So first, thanks to Malcolm, Sammy, Sven, Vicky, and Liz. For the 4 or 5 meetings we've had so far, including on Monday night. A lot of drafts going back and forth, not, whatever, I think, one of us would share a draft and we'd all send comments back and then bring that back to the next meeting. We did a lot of great work on Monday night and I just kind of dropped that into a slideshow. So I hope this captures everything. Committee members jump in as well.
There's a written report.
And there's a written report that went out today or last night. Sorry, that was late coming, but take a look at that as well. So the proposal elements haven't changed much from the general concept we presented previously. What we'll go through here is a little bit more of the template, our thinking within the proposal template that we all wrote up. So the proposal idea includes dam removal to restore Neshoba Brook as outlined, generally as shown in the 30% dam removal plans, and I'll have a graphic here, but we all have access to that. So when we talk about dam removal, there was some confusion about what parts of it remain. Will it be, exactly what we're referring to is what's in the plan. And our engineers and professionals jump in here, but a 30% plan is there to be commented on. And so if there are any specific improvements we have to how that final design is carried out, I suppose now's the time, but I don't think any of us felt we have the technical chops to sort of say, I want this here or that there. Following dam removal, an absolute requirement of this would be an adaptive management plan and funding to carry that out to monitor for and address any things that we don't want to be happening out there. I think we can suspect that we may have some invasive species that we want to be managed as the vegetation sort of comes in and reestablishes at the site. Some of these, marsh invasives like Phragmites, purple loosestrife, things that we've all talked about as a group. These can be managed. They need attention. They need a little bit of funding. There could be other eventualities that we'd want to tease out, channel migration in a fashion that we don't want, or some kind of erosion that needs to be mitigated. And then we want to bring enhancements to the site so that we're achieving these multiple goals that we've all talked about set as an organization, public benefits. That would include historic interpretation panels, potentially at the Pocket Park near Kenny Dunn Square, acknowledging both the long-term indigenous history of the site and the more recent early industrial use of West Concord and the even more recent historical connection correspond to West Concord and the whole region, the whole area to West Concord. Improvements to the Commonwealth Ave public access site, including more defined and safe and adequately surfaced parking, minimizing erosion and runoff, and an accessible kayak dock at that location. Water access for all persons from Giroux Park. We've talked about this in the Recreation Commission proposal to CPC, some form of dock design, TBD, from Giroux into what would remain open water at the deep pool shown on some maps. An additional fishing wildlife viewing platform at a site to be determined, could be Pond Street, could be near the current location of the dam where there's some fishing activity. Trail connections around the restored wetland system with the vision of creating sort of a trail network that goes all the way around the wetland to provide wildlife viewing and recreation and a connection to that whole system. Stream channel restoration or management concurrent with the dam removal to ensure that the stream channel forms close enough to Commonwealth Ave so that we do have canoe and kayak access there. That could be married with the the dock design. If it needs to be 20 feet away, 25 feet away, we need a 25-foot dock. So that would be a requirement that we'd want to have in this proposal. And then we've talked about limited dredging of the deep pool to ensure that it is remaining an open body of water. Importantly, we've organized, as I say, these enhancements in priority order with this group to help us think through what budget appetite we have. And you'll see, you want to see the budget punchline here, but we don't have that detailed yet. But as we sort of work through our options and the costs, we might, say cost benefit sort of runs out at this bullet. And as a group, we don't want to go beyond that. So this is the order that we've put the concepts in. And I'll get in a little more detail.
Is there any order to, and priority to those bullets, or you haven't
Top to
done that yet?
bottom, yeah. Sort of high priority at the top,
Okay,
lower priority at the bottom. On a cost benefit basis, like additional dredging of the deep pool is likely, it's more expensive than a dock,
got
right?
it, thank you.
I apologize. Oh, there we go. So when we talk about dam removal, this isn't readable probably at this scale, but this is the 30% design plan. There's a plan set that has a little bit more detail with the cross sections, and then there's the basis of design, which goes into great detail about how this was pulled together. And then also in the basis of design report, we have this graphic minus the blue line that shows the channel. So I'll come back to explain that. This is the projected post-removal, post-dam removal ecological conditions. I don't have the legend on here, but we're showing shallow marsh at the edge of the wetlands to more marshy conditions, shrub swamp, etc., open water. And then we sketched in, and in our proposal, we use in the caption sort of say, this is the desired channel location. Most particularly look at over near Commonwealth Ave access point, where we'd want to have, come close enough to make that a useful access point. But it's important also to point out that open water in the northern extent adjacent to Giroux Park. For analogs of what this might look like, we could go all over the place to dam removal locations to look for analogs. I just went down the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail to see Fort Pond Brook here. This was a photograph taken in August. So this is the brook itself. This is just south of Route 2. If any of you have mucked around there, there's an old concrete bridge that crosses Fort Pond Brook. This is just west of that, basically Route 2 to my back. This is a little bit further down or upstream on Fort Pond Brook along the dirt trails that run through the Acton land back there. And this is another image of Fort Pond Brook running through, shallow marsh. There have been questions about the depth of channel. How much water is going to be in there? What is this going to look like? Because, we are in a severe drought right now, but if you walk by the ComAv bridge, it looks like not a lot of water running through there. This was the photograph of Neshoba Brook above Warner's Pond, west of the cornfields, in August. And this was the picture today. There's still a lot of water out there. We had a comment at our meeting Monday about better understanding the hydrology and what is this channel going to look like. I could say we could use some help on this. There's still a lot of water in the Neshoba Brook above Warner's Pond right now. We've all heard for the year now that this is a flow through dam. The water comes in, goes out. But there's a lot of water above. Will the channel look like this when the dam is removed?
So just important to keep in mind, there's a series of beaver dams upstream that do actually help retain some of that water. So to get an understanding of what the brook will look like if the dam were gone, is look downstream of the dam. That's a way better proxy for what you're trying to understand for the conditions.
And another comment would be that there's a zone of influence that is created not just in Warner's Pond from the impounding nature of the dam, but also in the upstream reach of Neshoba Brook up to a certain point. So, just upstream of where Neshoba Brook comes into the pond, that is going to be a deeper channel than it would be post dam removal, because the impounding condition pushes up
Goes
out
all
of
the
the
way out
pond.
Okay.
And we actually have asked, in response to, you know, sort of anticipating this, you know, question, and in response to some comments that Dan Stapleton had provided us on the design report, we're asking EA to provide us a little bit more information on what the hydraulic condition is going to be following, dam removal. So for example, they used, I don't know if this is getting too much in the weeds, but they used a number of 53 cubic feet per second to calculate what the depth would be following dam
Mhm.
removal. And that number was based on what the anticipated flow rate would be at the stream, at the spring fish passage timeframe.
Mhm.
So it was trying to understand what that would look like to allow fish passage or not. So we've asked them to look at, you know, what is it gonna look like in July? You know, when the flows are at 20 CFS,
Mhm.
because that's important for everybody to understand. And I think at that stage, it's going to look like what Neshoba Brook does look like downstream, but we have to have them run those numbers.
Okay, so we'll have
Yeah.
that, that'll be helpful.
Just-
There we go.
Picking up on that, it might be useful to think of that in terms of an elevation and maybe outline a map that sort of shows what that, so just. I don't know whether this is accurate, but let's say the dam spillway level is 118 right now. So we could draw a circle wherever the elevation is 118 and a circle wherever it's, you know, I assume it's probably like 115 on the other side of the dam, and draw that, and that would kind of, would that capture that zone of influence that you were just talking about, Delia, or
So
is
you
that?
wanna go up, you wanna find, to say it's 118, you wanna go up to where the bathymetry in the brook is 118.
Yeah,
And at that point, that is the extent of the zone of influence. Beyond that, upstream is outside of that. And, you know, the other thing I think that needs to be, and I think you guys addressed this in the proposal, that, you know, if the dam is removed, you know, the information on where the channel is going to be located is based on the best information that we have to date.
Yeah.
And, you know, streams are dynamic systems, and they will have, you know, there's a large floodplain that stream would be able to move. So how much, you know, you want to engineer that to ensure that the stream channel is going to be in, you know, the location that you want, but then I think that's one question, but I think the other thing is that there has to be some understanding that streams, you know, water is gonna flow where water wants to flow. And we can only do so much to ensure that it, you know, we can't guarantee that it's going to be in a specific location from here until the end of time.
Yeah, it'll be a natural system.
Right.
And I think, Mark, to clarify, the number now would be different downstream, so it's even lower than, I think you said 115 or 130.
well, whatever the.
Even lower today.
The level of the stream is below the dam
Yeah.
is probably some kind of an estimate for where it's gonna be if the dam wasn't there. Also to pick up on, Keith mentioned the beaver dams. In a project like this, would the beaver dams be just left alone to, you know, and
Yeah.
presumably do what they do? I don't know whether beavers would abandon it if it suddenly became different, but it might be interesting to understand what that impact would be.
Yeah, I mean, typically, unless beaver dams are causing a public safety issue,
Yeah.
they're not managed. You know, if there's an issue with flooding, or there's an issue with, you know, septic, you know, I mean, if a road flooding or, you know, something like that, then they're, but they are ephemeral, you know, they move over time.
There's a risk, or kind of a risk, there could be an increase in beaver dams in the pond, there could be a series of beaver dams that form in that floodplain area, just something to consider.
I think beavers. They need to make a dam, right? So they need wood. And there are the right conditions up south of the cornfields and further up. While seeing the beaver dams or talked about the beaver dams up there. I don't think there's a lot of accessible wood in the marsh that will form. So it doesn't seem like a location that beavers would import wood versus being up in.
Well, the shrub swamp is restored, they'll have plenty of work there, but I'm not saying it's gonna happen in year one, but long term. yeah.
The one feature that we take for granted is the deep hole.
Yeah.
The deep hole, and I'm just wondering, given this conversation and it looks like the way you drawn it, the deep hole's fed by the creek. You know, if you cut off the channel, you're still gonna have a deep hole, but not forever. So I mean, there's another unknown about what happens to the deep hole under certain extreme conditions with this drought or flood.
Yeah, this graphic is from the alternatives analysis.
Yeah,
And so it's another estimate of where the channel would be. The deep hole is based on the bathymetry that's been established and groundwater and, or just water table where it intersects. So if the channel were to run between Scout and Miraca Island and not intersect the deep hole, my sense is the deep hole would still be there, just like Walden Pond is there and White Pond is there, because it's not fed by a river, it's just groundwater intersecting.
do we know
with the
enough about
topography.
hydrogeology that's, because we've had conversations about groundwater and that there has been a really deep study of that, I believe, around the pond.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that.
If
pond would
if
be-
that's a known that the deep hole is fed with groundwater, then I.
It's just, it intercepts the groundwater.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, if the groundwater's here, there's gonna be that much of a pool. If it was a super drought condition and the water level was down, the level of the deep hole
The
would
thing to
go.
consider is if that dam is gone, the water level in that area is gonna drop at
Yeah.
least 5 feet. So you have to reduce the deep hole by 5 feet, the minimum.
Right, but this was considering that in the alternatives analysis, right? I mean, that,
I don't think the alternatives analysis considered that, but that's also something that we're asking EA to look at a little bit more closely is what that channel, I think it's important that there's an intersection of the stream
Yeah.
with the deep hole
yeah, right.
for that pool to be viable.
So I guess the answer, the deep hole is not going away, but it could fluctuate in size and level over time.
Yeah.
Well,
And we,
Depends, you just said if the stream doesn't go through the deep hole.
Well, then it's fed with,
think of this, if
intersects groundwater.
whether or not the channel is going through the deep hole, it's gonna be a marshy, kind of pervious to water vegetation between the channel and the pool. So the pool, the bottom of the pool is deeper than the river channel. I wouldn't see having a river channel marsh and then an empty hole in the ground.
Right.
There's gonna be, the water is gonna be there.
But there's
But-
a definition of deep that changes,
Well,
because I
deep
think
is
now
like-
we're thinking of deep, but
Well,
will be at least 5 feet shallower.
Yeah, I'm
and in a
thinking more-
drought, it'll be even shallower than that.
I'm thinking more of size than depth.
Well, because it'll keep shrinking, so
Exactly.
if it's this big at 12 feet deep, it might be this big at 5 feet deep, and if in a drought condition like this year, it might be this big at 3 feet deep, so.
So
What
it
is
could
it?
vacillate from a 2 acre pond to a 5 acre hole.
Yeah, we don't, yeah.
Yeah, okay, just,
So
Well,
just
not
wanna,
better.
Seems like we don't
just wanna
know.
check in, do we wanna, I mean,
Yeah,
it
keep
might be
moving
helpful
along.
to give
Yeah.
the group a chance to finish their conversation, and we can do question response, maybe
So-
we'll answer some of this.
I don't seem to be able to go backwards on these slides. It's
Yeah.
my first time using this program, but I think the previous graphic I showed from the 30% design shows projected conditions post-dam removal with that 4.5 acre.
Yeah.
Just want to point out, Jeff, it wasn't the alternatives analysis, it's the basis of design report.
The previous graphic, but this is a different graphic.
No,
That-
but you said this graphic was from the alternatives
I
analysis.
think that's the
This
case.
is-
Okay, well, there's an identical or not
Yeah, it's very
exactly.
similar graphic. The other one just goes into a little bit more detail on those vegetation communities.
Right.
This is generalized. So this is just to show these proposed or conceptual trail designs and amenities. Purple here is Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, existing trail, sidewalks and whatnot along Lawsbrook Road, and purple showing existing pedestrian ways. And then on the west side of Neshoba Brook up here is an existing dirt path. It's a lovely little path, comes down to the end of the Wright Road cul-de-sac. And then goes up, crosses Fort Pond Brook with an existing, not attractive, but perfectly functional concrete bridge. And then there's that red trail that comes across a little field adjacent to Route 2. And we used to be able to walk across the old train trestle Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is great, but at that point, it's 20 feet off the ground to cross Route 2. And you can no longer cross the Neshoba Brook at that point, at grade. So we'd love to have a kind of a recreated bridge crossing there, either using the abutments underneath the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail or some other solution that would allow residents of Wright Road in this area to the west to come up, intersect with Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and then get all the way over here. And then one could, you know, walk along the west side of the Neshoba Brook down along Wright Road, Losbrook Road. Or possibly both, have this red trail coming tighter to Warner's Pond, so that you have this sort of circumnavigation of the whole wetland system. You come down through the cornfields, we'll show in our assumptions, that needs, an agreement conversation with the Department of Corrections, because that's DOC land. And then this would be the most expensive part of a trail system. In yellow there, it shows, the conceptual raised boardwalk crossing across the stream channel and wetlands. And then down to this peninsula, forested peninsula that's owned by the town, in red, a surface trail coming down to Losbrook Road. There is a privately owned parcel adjacent to Losbrook Road. There's a little sliver of town-owned land. Maybe it gets squeezed in there. There's some form of easement or some sort of boardwalk that gets us back to Losbrook Road. And then, you know, you've got this potential walking all the way around the pond. We show the dock concept at Giroux, adjacent to Giroux Park, and the deep pool.
Sorry, Jeff, can I
Yep.
just interrupt for 1 second? Can you use your cursor?
Oh, yeah,
So that
yeah.
people online can see.
I apologize, folks, online.
Not working.
Yeah, I'm usually good at presentations, but I can't see my cursor.
Okay,
It's just not like appearing.
you're doing a good job verbally describing.
Yeah, I apologize to folks online. So then, you know, location, style, function of that location, TBD, hopefully with this Recreation Commission, CPC or other, you know, funded work. Improved access in a dock at the Common Ave, access point on the, you know, the east side of Warner's Pond. And then another potential wildlife viewing location, we show it down here at the current dam location. It's labeled fishing, but it could be, you know, wildlife viewing fishing. That could also be at the end of Pond Street at the town on public access point. We also show a dock on the northwest side of Scout Island. Maybe that doesn't require a dock, but we all know that we want to have adequate, agreeable access to Scout Island at that point. So maybe the channel is right there and they can pull right up to the Sandy Landing. Or maybe there's some sort of enhancement required to ensure access at that point. I show a dash line on the east side of MCI. My thinking isn't very complex over there, but just we have this opportunity with the redevelopment of MCI, the prison property, to continue a waterfront walking experience. So this whole network of trails could run along the wetlands and bring all kinds of people connecting to the water. These are screen grabs online of some potential, you know, dock and viewing platform styles. This one could be for fishing, for wildlife viewing, for skating in the winter. Here's an accessible kayak launch. There's one at Ice House Landing in Maynard. That's a really nice design. All kinds of designs online. This is a wildlife viewing platform that's at the Great Meadows National Wildlife Refuge, not here in Concord, but down in Sudbury at their Weir Hill property. It's a beautiful trail, a beautiful boardwalk down there. That's a nice walk. And then again, just a screen grab at the concept of a raised boardwalk going over open water like the Neshoba Brook Channel and over a section of marsh between the cornfields and the town-owned peninsula, as we've been calling it. This is possible. It would need to be reviewed and permitted, and it's expensive. This is my photograph of the condition underneath the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail bridge over the Neshoba Brook, just south of Route 2. So Bruce Freeman Rail Trail overhead, and these old train trestle abutments that exist and maybe some, an adequate subframe could be put there to have a walking, an at-grade or ground level bridge that would connect again to that, the Acton forests and the School Street fields and, Wright Road trails. So those are some photos of the concept for what could happen in these locations. So now getting to more of the text element of how we went through and reviewed all these comments or these concepts against what we're trying to do here. So our group feels that the outcomes here would be restoration of Neshoba Brook wetlands with a free flowing stream through the marsh, 4 to 5 acre open water section in the deep pool, connection of aquatic habitat to the Assabet River and to both Neshoba Brook and Fort Pond Brook watersheds, providing spawning grounds for benefit of native freshwater fish and supporting recovery of anadromous fish, reducing and eliminating invasive aquatic plants, creating opportunities for water-based recreational connectivity when seasonal water levels permit from the Assabet River to Neshoba Brook and Fort Pond Brook, expansion of marsh habitat, extending habitat for endangered wood turtles currently mapped in Fort Pond Brook marshes, and recreating the pre-1850s historical condition of free-flowing stream and surrounding wetlands supporting warm water, cool water, and anadromous fish, and reintroducing spring fish runs, enabling cultural traditions of local indigenous people. Recreation outcomes would include these improved recreational amenities, improved parking and accessible boat launch at Commonwealth Ave, new water access from Giroux Park, fishing and wildlife viewing access at the locations I described or to be determined, historical information and recognition and celebration of 10,000 more years of watershed history prior to the arrival of European settlers, historical information recognition of the major milestones in settlement and industrial history of West Concord, the European settlement, historical information about local military activities leading up to the Civil War and other, other important historical elements, historical things, features we want to talk about. Clearly marked and safe walking trails around the restored wetland system and safe water access to Scout Island. A little bit more on access. These access improvements we've described, all ability or accessible or all persons access to the recreational opportunities by improving parking and launch facilities at Com Ave. Expanded use by people of all ages through these amenities, safe water access to Scout Island, and improved trail connectivity to West Concord Village, Wright Road, Lawsbrook Road, and potentially integrating the reimagined MCI land. Importantly, we call out the need for, I just have the term mitigation here, or being prepared to mitigate conditions that, we don't favor. So maintenance and management plan for vegetation management, for invasive plants, and limited dredging and even, designed channel stabilization to ensure the channel forms close enough to Com Ave for boat access. Assumptions, we assume the financial and technical feasibility of limited dredging using equipment and contractors mobilized for dam removal to encourage that desired channel location. Benefits to anadromous fish assume the removal of Talbot Mills Dam and Billerica, which is in permitting and planning currently. We assume a safe and accessible, a safe and accessible full trail loop around the wetland system would require pedestrian safety improvements at the Kenny Dunn area, Com Ave Lawsbrook Road intersection. We can't talk about this lovely 360-degree route if there's no, sidewalk. We wouldn't want to encourage people to be there until there's some safety improvements there. Proposed loop trail assumes agreement to place trail across Department of Corrections land, and the timeline that I don't detail here, but we have in our report is assumes progress on accessing state, federal, or private funds to support them. So we weighed this against our criteria. First, history and character. I hope folks can read that text size. We feel that we meet almost all of the history and character criteria, maintaining and further protecting historical assets, enhancing the natural resource values of the water body and surrounding land, improving or enhancing natural environment. We answered yes to those. One of the criteria is enhancing the visual appeal of the existing area landscape. We go into this a little bit in the text, others jump in here, but we answer that, essentially acknowledging that's subjective. Some folks may think, and we've heard from folks who would think that the removal of open water expanse of Warner's Pond would be a detriment to visual appeal. There are a lot of well, I shouldn't say a lot. I found an online or an Army Corps of Engineers visual appeal assessment. Keith, tell me if you ever worked with this, but it talks about variety of elements in the landscape. As we all know, removal would involve change in what we currently have, or from what we currently have out there at Warner's Pond. We would have a variety of natural communities, from the brook, little smaller body of open water, marsh, deep marsh, shrub swamp, etc. So there's an argument to be made that that might be more visually appealing with more variety. Criteria around livability and values. Will this alternative enhance Concord's desirability as a place to live? Again, you see the answers there. Increased quality and quantity of recreational assets, yes. Increased opportunities for public enjoyment and use of the water body, we feel yes. Contributing to improvements to public health, such as reducing exposure to mosquito and tick-borne diseases, qualified, yes. I'd invite Malcolm, public health, retired physician and public health expert, our public health expert, to comment on this after I just finished this slide. Enhancing the resilience of community infrastructure. Yes and no. That's copied from our report, and someone will remind me why we had yes and no in that one. But Malcolm, on public health?
On public health, I have not seen any formal mosquito counts, larvae counts done on Walden Pond. I can't find any evidence of it. No, Warner's Pond, sorry. And it therefore makes it difficult to make a comparison between what it would be in the current state or in a future state. Most of the evidence is that open water compared to the wetland is a higher risk of mosquito breeding. But without some sort of formal assessment, and we would have to ask the health board for their assessment on what the situation would be. So we can't say for certain. We can surmise that, the risk is low now. So we can surmise that it would be lower overall.
I can chime in on the other one, the yes, no. The main part was that there is a slightly better situation on smaller storms with respect to flooding, but there is no improvement for the large storm systems. As if you think about how this goes to the bridge and over there on the Sugar Brook Bakery part, this will not change. So this is still kind of a problem for large storm system when the water comes in. So for smaller storm system, say the new wetlands give you kind of a area to buffer that a little bit. So you have a slight improvement there, but no improvement on the large system.
Thank you, Sven. And yeah, so for resilience, we looked at flooding risk. And as Sven describes, a 30% basis of design report models modest reduced flooding at these frequent smaller flooding events, 5 and 20 year events.
2 and 5 years.
2 and 5 year events, thank you. But at the less frequent but more bigger flooding events, there's really not much difference because the basin fills as it would now. Around mobility and accessibility, this would, with the amenities, we'd have increased access for walking, biking, mobility devices to the waterways, And then improved access to the water body surrounding land. We said yes to both of those. Ecological sustainability, we have a lot of criteria here. We answered yes to, and again, you can see all of these, so. Yes, to improve wildlife habitat for diverse species, improve fisheries, habitat, improved habitat to support diverse native plant communities, improved water quality, improve connectivity among habitats, would provide a sustainable ecological condition over time, improve resilience of the natural resources to flooding events, yes, modestly, as we just described, contributing to improved water quality and downstream systems. Yes, that was around especially the avoiding the temperature increase that we've heard about. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions and or increase carbon sequestration. Yes, in the long term, a marsh will begin to put more carbon into the roots. It's a small, modest contribution, but yes, over the long term, we feel that a marsh will increase carbon sequestration relative to current conditions, and then reduce dependence on synthetic chemicals. Probably, you know, we don't have the alternative to weigh against right now. Control of Phragmites often does involve very limited use of herbicides. So it would depend on sort of what emerges there, but
Reed canary grass is gonna be a big one. It's upstream, it's entirely in the Fort Pond Brook system. It's already in the northwest corner of Warner's Pond.
Yeah.
That stuff's gonna spread like crazy.
that one is often, well, we should talk about that. That was sort of considered naturalized, like a lot of our hayfield grasses, but it is non-native. Fiscal sustainability, are we using an identified and sustainable funding source? We have yes here. We have an appendix that has about 20 different funding sources, state and federal, for dam removal. We all know this is not a high hazard dam. We've heard about that. We know it's not at risk of damage, but it is, we've also heard that it's attractive from a migratory fish restoration perspective. This does not include known funding sources for the amenities that we have in mind. So we can talk about that as a group. Minimizing the need for additional resources. Yes, we're minimizing the need for ongoing expenses for dam management and pond management. Providing cost recovery, yes, in the form of these outside grants. Generating additional income, not likely, and feasible from a technological permitting and engineering perspective. I think yes, based on the other dam removals.
Get back to the first one, I think. So the yes pertains to dam removal, but also you said the other amenities, you haven't identified sources for those, because there's a lot more in this proposal than dam removal.
Yeah.
right?
What would you all say about that? We
There's-
talked a lot about funding
There's
sources for the other.
significant funds available for restoration of habitat for anadromous fish. There's an endangered wood turtle species. Upstream of the pond, and there is money available to develop new habitat for that species
Okay.
specifically.
For the trail.
So the boardwalks and trail systems,
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we may just want to put yes.
We'll alter that to capture partially something to that
Yeah,
effect. I mean,
'cause
there are
that-
DCR trail grants.
Mass trails.
These aren't millions of dollars though.
But to make it really
Yeah,
clear.
just to
we're
be,
gonna yes.
just put it all out there if we want to do. And then stakeholder concerns, we have a paragraph, couple paragraphs for each of these. Again, a lot of thanks to Bruce for a quick email back and forth yesterday to see if I could pull together some language coming out of our meeting tonight to acknowledge Indigenous community interests. And this is, you know, again, we go into detail in the proposal, but please shout out any other stakeholders we're not thinking of. And for folks who can't see the slide, Indigenous community members, abutters, current pond users, Friends of Warner's Pond, Concord Scout House, and Scouts, Bruce Freeman Rail Trail users, citizens of Concord, Department of Corrections, ORS and their members and the Wild and Scenic River Stewardship Council,
Maybe Giroux Park as well.
Giroux Park users.
Maybe recreation. department.
Yeah, the town, it's a town.
Right,
Town of
Citizens.
Concord.
Well, Department of Corrections with MCI. What's,
Right.
what their, what were the
Well, they're in a
TFC's
butter.
concerns would be,
They're in a
just as a
butter,
butter?
they'd be going through their land.
Yeah, but the land, yeah.
The trail concept was to get very
Yeah,
far.
okay.
it would be Department of Corrections, and they're in a butter. And I think that was my last slide.
All right, so first of all, big round of applause to the Dam people.
Yeah.
Work for this
Get a lot of cash.
significant work, and, yeah, just clearly a lot has gone into this, so, really well done to all of you. So let's open it up to, discussion, to questions. Yeah, I think our purpose here is there anything else, that this group needs to do to think about, to fully flesh out this proposal? We're not here to decide this is what we want to do today. We're not here to get alignment on, if we all agree on how they've done their criteria, right? We're gonna do that as a full group, right, in the next phase of this. But, we do want to make sure that they've given us the information that's reasonably accessible to make our evaluation, right? And make this as strong a proposal as possible. So, I see Sven, then we'll go to Paul. Go ahead.
And I just want to encourage everyone, if you haven't done it, read the document. And just rely on the slides. Slides are just a very, very high level summary
Yeah.
of the work that's put in. And some things are explained much more in detail and could also raise more questions from all of you around it. So please, if you haven't done it, read the document.
Thanks, Sven. I think that goes for all of the proposals, for sure, right? Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I may be showing my lack of reading the whole proposal.
We just got it,
At that risk,
yeah.
uncertainties, all these proposals have uncertainties, projecting future conditions. What would be your top one or two or three uncertainties? And maybe a proposal should have that, because we're planning, we
Yeah.
talked about one, where's the stream actually gonna go?
That's the
That could
biggest-
change,
That's a
and
big-
is that it's probably not a killer, but it's something we ought to. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on one of the major uncertainties,
I'll let someone else speak.
can I just throw in on top of that, my concern about that, and perhaps David would mention this as well, is how is that gonna affect Scout Island? I mean, what happens when it's, like the summertime, when the water's really low? Is there gonna be any water access at all to Scout
well,
Island?
you're leading the witness here in terms of uncertainties. He couldn't come up with that himself, but that's one.
Well, I think it's a concern though
Well, it's a concern and an uncertainty.
right,
I'm gonna share the hot seat with the other.
I think there, it's, the uncertainty is what you just made. This is how will nature react in taking it out? Where's exactly the stream going? Even, I would say, if the stream is where it is mapped out today, where, say, all the studies were correct, yeah, you could have done a few major storm events and it starts changing over
Yeah,
time.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this involvement over time, that therefore we build in this kind of a maintenance concept to say is we have to have some kind of ongoing maintenance. This, even after everything's settled, is how is this going? We can't force, to Delia's point, nature into something. So that is the biggest thing. The other one is water levels. We see right now how water levels are in the severe drought. We know, like, from a climate perspective, we have more extremes. We have more water on one end and we have less water on the other end. Yeah, so we will experience this in this wetland to say, but how far it really goes, and we have studies about the extremes and in, let's say, heavy storms and what this looks like. No major difference to what we have, but definitely in severe droughts, it looks different, but that's nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a decision we all as a town have to make at a certain point is say, how much do we have nature doing its thing or not?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like this proposal is locked into any future specific channel, because it's gonna change.
Yeah, so
But
I
that's
would
an
say,
uncertainty.
yeah, I would say to continue that. I think there are a few things. The dollar timing is an uncertainty. You know, we've talked about when might we be eligible in the states, you know, and there's in their view of funding our dam removal, given that it's new and it's in good shape and it's not a high hazard. So that's, I don't know, is it 2 years, is it 5 years, is it 20 years? We have no way of ascertaining that. So I would say that's an uncertainty. I would say the depth of the water, and you were getting to it, has ramifications all around. So the depth of the water, when it's severe rain, which we will have, might look a lot like it does today, honestly. We'll have a deep hole, we'll have a channel, we'll have water flowing, you can kayak the whole thing. In today's environment, when it's severe drought, Scout Island will be walkable potentially from Commonwealth Avenue. We say it's water access, but there may not be water access some years, so we can't promise some of these things. We don't know if a deep hole will be 3 feet or 5 feet in those days, and so it's, I don't know what deep hole means, and it may end up attracting more invasives. So we might have to rely on more chemicals on those years for the deep hole to be usable. So we don't know, that's definitely an uncertainty. And all of those in drought years, I think the uncertainty is that 1 degree temperature drop in the summertime. If there's this much water, is probably not gonna be a 1 degree temperature drop. So the fish passage question is also uncertain a few months of the year, where there's no guarantee. So if we're saying we're doing it for certain reasons, we can say we're uncertain in certain years if we're addressing some of these items.
In terms of channel location, I've been involved in some stream restorations or cranberry bog restorations where channel is very deliberately located, and given that channels erode and meander, there was, you know, logs basically and root balls put on the outside of meander to, you know, hold the channel in place until the vegetation rooted in and everything was a little more bedded in. So there's low tech or slightly higher tech approaches to favoring where a channel forms, at least for a section. We wouldn't probably do that for whatever hundreds of yards this is, but in a section.
Yeah, I think one thing we all agreed on was that, at least I think we agreed on it, is that we actually don't have enough information right now to know, you know, where that 115 foot water line is and how that's going to affect the overall depth of the channel in different places. I had a second point, but senility has crept in, so I'll
You'll
just,
come back here.
It's in there. You'll find
it's
it.
in there, but it'll come to me about 4 o'clock in the morning.
So, David, had his hand up, it just went down. Not sure if you had to hop off or something. Yeah, okay, well, if he comes back, it's like he's not in the meeting anymore. If he comes back in, we'll head to him. But any other
I
questions or comments in the
remember my
room?
second.
Okay,
point.
there you go.
It's interesting that last year was one of the wettest years on
Mhm,
in record. This year is one of the driest. I
mhm.
mean, I never recall having red alerts for bushfires in Massachusetts. Admittedly, I've only lived here 40 years, so it's obviously happened before then. But we don't know which way the climate is going to go. Is it going to be 1 year dry, 1 year wet? Is it going to be more continuously dry, or is it going to be more continuously wet?
Yeah.
So locking into any sort of where we're going to have a channel or we're not going to have a channel, we don't have crystal balls.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we can't provide a definitive answer.
Mhm.
I guess another just question I have is you gave in your write-up, you gave a timeline as far as obtaining permits and whatever for the dam removal. And then you have all these wonderful boardwalks and the walking path and any sense of of timing for something like that and what you might have to go through for permitting and through the NRC for some things, for the boardwalks, I'm sure. Any thought given to that or any sense of that?
Say not yet.
No, we didn't.
We
I think
did,
it's probably longer than we think.
yeah, we
That's what I'm
did,
thinking too.
we obviously can't say in terms of year. I mean, we don't know whether, if this is approved, whether work will start in 2026, 2027, whatever.
I understand that
But,
part, yeah.
I think we laid out a fairly, lengthy, process, in terms of permitting and planning and using that time also to get to establish funding for these things, because it would be ideal to have the funding for the whole thing rather than do it stage by stage. My guess is that if this was approved, it could well be 3 or 4 years before any work starts, just going through the normal process. That should be adequate time to locate funding to maybe put in the boardwalk. Whatever.
One of the
I
things we
don't-
talked about with permitting on the trail top as well, because we had talked, I think Delia had brought up like, if we're having a trail that hugs, it's gonna be more challenging for permitting if it's in the wetlands. So we kind of tried to like sketch it kind of like at the 25, we had a discussion like, do we want to just like drop a trail straight through that cornland? Like, that's technically connecting it, but we had a discussion about like, you want to, you don't want to walk through a cornfield, you want to walk through like this beautiful new wetland. So we kind of like threw out the idea of like, okay, well, like, maybe we can see if it's slightly further back, but you still feel like you're there. And if that's like ends up not being feasible, we do have this kind of backup idea of like straight line through the cornfield, you know? So we had some places where we thought a little bit about like, okay, where might we hit some problems there? And came up with a couple of backup ideas.
I
But
think for timeline, I think it would be instructive to run our ideas past Delia, Sam, give it some thought and think through. Yeah, what would be reasonable, and we didn't, I think one draft of our document we spent years on, but that's converted to day 0, year 1, year 2, type thing.
I guess the concern would be, I mean, that, or in my opinion, it seemed to have been laid out like for Gerald Park, that this is gonna, you're gonna have this, you're gonna have this, and then it disappears and it's like, oh, this is the end of it. There's no more money now. So what I guess a concern would be, we take the dam down and then you have all these wonderful ideas.
Yeah.
But then what happens if they
Yeah.
don't come to fruition?
And I think
Then
that's
what?
the power of these proposals, where this is whole cloth, this is the whole proposal.
Yeah.
And we feel to meet all of the objectives that we all started talking about for
Right.
community benefit. It's not just dam removal and then, we'll try to put a fishing dock out there, but we think that this is a whole proposal until, as I said, we as a group talk about like, and we think here's where the cost benefit runs out, and then that shapes the final proposal.
He read my mind like amazingly right on, but,
Frightening.
yeah. but you know, you present your proposal here, and I think identifying the funding sources to say, there's permitting and there's timing, but if we build a border, I think this can come from this funding source. We don't have that committed, but we know the source. Is it the town? Is it town capital? Is it state funding? I think you have to look at each one of those. And we've identified that because not unlike Giroux,
Right.
you're presenting a proposal which has some really interesting recreational features in addition to the ecological benefits. So
So I would echo that, and I think, that certainly Recreation Commission, I know has heard this message that there's, and, the middle school costs, that there's a lot of concern about where additional, money is gonna come from. And how that's going to be allocated and, public safety, public works, there's some gaps there that, funding needs to be kind of dedicated to those areas. So, I think as best as you can identify, dam removal grant opportunities that would be feasible, and then, you know, the 2.5 million that is in the, you know, allocated money for both capital and CPA funds, you know, what about, how do those get, you know, would those get reallocated to other improvements that you're, you know, considering for the proposal? So I think you're right, that it does need to address your points about, you know, all these things that were promised for Giroux, and then, sorry, we don't have any more money.
Right.
But I think your proposal, in order to be compelling, has to include all the elements, or,
Mhm.
you know, some combination of the elements that
Right.
you're, you know, talking about here.
Paul, you look like you have something to say.
Should,
You look like you have something to say. You're just thinking.
do I look at something?
Yeah.
I'd say what I'm gonna say. I'm done.
So.
Yeah, but I think,
Yeah, go ahead, Ben. Yeah.
so again, it's looking at the time frame. I think we come to a point where we can point to sources of capital, yeah, and sources of funding. But I think it's, we can't say, okay, for sure,
Right.
we are getting X%, let's say, from source A, B, C for taking the dam route. Yeah, we can point to these, and that's why we think it takes time. And this is why you say it's, okay, if this is an option, in the end, this group or the town in the end says it should go. This is it's a several multi-year process to get there. And I think in this group, I think it's, in the end, I see this as would be interested to hear then what are the short-term action group, what they're proposing, and that most likely goes hand in hand, because you have to bridge from where you are today to where you want to go. So there's a several year period where you have to think what happens in between. And we didn't cover that part because we assume that any elements to bridge the time from here to where you can start working and realizing it, most likely we can use, or the town can use things from the other working group looking at the short-term actions.
That's a great point, Sven. I think kind of generally, we might be pulling from different work for proposals overall when we come up with our final recommendation.
Yeah, I guess I'd make the comment that, I think it's interesting to look at the different amenities and think about them in terms of which ones are really dependent on the fact that the dam is removed, like that big boardwalk, for example. It doesn't seem like you'd ever do that, but some of the other things like the dock areas and some of those things are elements that might get introduced anyway, and I would do that, I think, in order to be able to compare these proposals and evaluate them against each other later, thinking in terms of what's sort of the overall capital investment that's being proposed in the removal scenario. It's really there to sort of offset or make up for the losses of open water space, and, you know, kind of offset the drawbacks of losing such a large body of water. And then think about what those lead to in terms of capital facilities that need to be maintained over time. Because if we fast forward, let's say, 20 years goes by and the dam has been removed and all these things have been put in place, there's still this sort of residual maintenance of amenities that were sort of put in place for that. And I think that's kind of a way of getting at the true cost of the town. It's really easy for us to get focused on the sort of transition and the implementation and things like that, but I think we kind of need to look a little bit more down the road. It's not unlike in the dredging proposal. We have to ask ourselves, how long is dredging really good for, and when would we have to do it again? Or in the short-term limited actions, we're probably mostly, starting right out on that map. We need to put so many dollars into invasive vegetation, aquatic vegetation every single year just to hold what exists right now. And so I'm kind of, maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but I'm thinking about, you know, how we're going to sort these out in the light of the fact that they overlap and there's opportunities for overlap. When we come to that decision.
To that point, I have a suggestion. So, when we put together the Giroux proposal, became apparent that, you know, Public Works is an important stakeholder because they take care of Giroux. So we had to figure, well, what's it gonna cost to maintain that? You might want to put in the proposal an operation maintenance proposal or plan that's built into there and get the some rough costs and so what's gonna take to maintain it. That's probably true in every one of these proposals. So the Public Works part of these are, we don't want them to sneak up on us.
I guess
We
the
have
other,
some agreement on, for all of us, what timeline we'd be looking at. I mean, 50 years, 100 years, 20 years, in terms of thinking out
yeah, I think it's,
the current.
I think it's
costs.
useful to at least consider from the individual proposals perspective. At what point do we think steady state kind of occurs? So, you know, if there's a year zero that the plan is beginning to be implemented. You know, do you reach steady state in year 3 or year 5 or, you know, or you're sort of in the best case, worst case scenario. And also picking up on what Paul was saying, I think an enhancement to this proposal might, and again, maybe this is covered in the document and I'll admit that I haven't made it through that. But what sorts of synergies might be able to be implemented right away with respect to the Giroux Park area? Like, is that considered sort of the trailhead for this system? And so there's additional signage and they're just sort of pulling in that element of how does this particular set of things relate directly to that? So that we could see how that might fit into a strategic plan for Giroux.
Right. I'm taking note of all these kind of suggestions. It's helpful. I do just want to cycle back, Malcolm, you had a question sort of on behalf of your work group, if you're going to be doing maintenance costs. We just want to kind of make an assumption like we'd like there to be specificity around kind of ongoing maintenance of amenities that we expect to kind of just be continuing, or I think you questioned, should we have a time frame around that 20 years? So I
Well, I was
think,
just thinking how,
yeah.
if, you know, you have a boardwalk and what is its average life? Because then you've got to amortize the
Right,
expenditures
right, yeah.
and, are we looking at, as I said, 10 years, boardwalk's probably not going to need very much. 20 years, it's going to need a little bit, 50, it's going to need, so that does have an influence.
But to that point, we could look at it as information to say, what is the average lifetime of a boardwalk? Yeah, to get perspective is when is major reinvestment needed again. Yeah, and that's, or what is the lifetime of, I don't know, this a sign that talks about the history. Yeah, it's not the biggest cost block, but yeah, but you get it, for these amenities, the average lifetime is X. So this is where you can base your kind of long-term view on.
Okay,
Yeah.
it sounds reasonable, yeah. So just to name issues that have come up, right, in this conversation, we heard earlier that EA has been asked to get us a little more information on the water level, kind of the depth of the extent of the deep hole, right? So sounds like we can expect to have that at some point before we're gonna need to evaluate these options.
So we're gonna have a better understanding of what the depth would be under a summer condition. And also, we should have a better understanding of what that zone of influence is, and how far up, you know, are we getting an accurate assessment of what the water, the channel geometry is, you know, anticipated to look like?
Great. So it sounds like that's something that this work group can incorporate, you know, when it comes along. We've heard some suggestions around being transparent about uncertainties, and I think that's something that, you know, was suggested for this group, was also named as something that could be applicable to all the work groups. Just what do we know, what don't we know? What will be done to try to address uncertainties, but what just can't be addressed because it's unknown, right? So we heard about the location of the stream, water levels, the timing and the money, right, and how that's gonna happen. we heard suggestion around having some kind of a timeline around kind of how long it might take to get some of these amenities and improvements. Suggestion that it could be more compelling and helpful if we're really specifically identifying the funding sources that could be used to pay up the porch for dam removal, but also for some of these improvements that have been identified. A suggestion that we should, across all the work groups proposals, and also for this one, just be transparent around kind of the upkeep and maintenance costs, or potentially the duration of kind of the amenities that are being suggested. And then finally, a suggestion that it could be really compelling to draw, kind of, to be clear about kind of where you see the synergies with Giroux, right, in your proposal. So those are the things that I heard, all very helpful. Anything that anyone wants to bring up in addition to that, or to kind of amend? Yeah, Mark.
I had just one other question that came up for me kind of early, and this is me not knowing a whole lot about this subject, but in terms of the invasive vegetation that could be expected in the wetland, is there any benefit in a project like this to try to sort of do some sort of pre-removal? For example, if there's loosestrife that exists in today around the edges of this wetland system, does it make sense to try and go after that and get rid of it so that it doesn't immediately take over the newly exposed land? And, you know, so I just wondered that while you were talking about this.
It's a good thought, and I can't remember if this made it into the document, or I have it jotted somewhere, the idea that the timing of the dam removal operation and the exposure of, you know, what will become the marsh be timed so it's not, I don't know, late fall when Phragmites, which is wind dispersed, is like happy to go find some new ground. So that would be one element around timing.
That's a good question. Should we remove some, if there's pockets of invasives, I think was what you're
Yeah,
saying, should we
exactly.
remove them now while it's this much before it's this much?
I think that we could put a sentence into that monitoring mitigation plan to
Yeah.
say, including, what would you call that, pre-suppression or something
Yeah,
like that.
Because if you could get rid of some things,
But
almost.
I don't
completely,
remember
you might want
where I-
less.
where I read this, but recently I read an article about what's happened at Lake Mead out west, where they've had a recent, you know, because of the real drop, there's been a bunch of land exposed all of a sudden, and they've discovered that there was a seed bank of native species that was trapped and has been encapsulated for 60 years or something, and suddenly this seed bank is actually sprouting and out competing some of the invasives themselves. And so, you know, here we've got a system that's been inhabited for 150 years. So it kind of makes you wonder what's down there.
That's a piece of why we like kind of call for like an adaptive management plan rather than
Yeah.
like planting it in advances. Like we want to give it a chance, the seed bank a chance to see what's there.
Yeah.
And with everything I've read about what's happened here in Massachusetts, it's surprising that even after 150 years, there is a natural seed bank and they do repopulate.
Yeah.
It's quite stunning. Delia, can you correct me if I'm wrong on this? With purple loosestrife, we don't actually want to be removing purple loosestrife, because if we do, we're going to remove the beetles that control it. So
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I don't worry about loosestrife as an invasive concern.
Yeah.
Because of but there are others like Phragmites and, you know, others that,
Not a botanist.
that's. So we just, yeah, no, you're right, Malcolm. Yeah, we'll keep some, just to make sure that the beetle population continues to overwinter and control next year's loosestrife.
Yeah.
All right, so just noting the time, I think we had sort of imagined moving to the next agenda item, but of course, if there are pressing suggestions or comments that anyone else wants to offer, just please speak now. All right, well, again, big thank you to the dam removal group, for the work and for fielding the questions. Well done, and we'll press on to our next agenda item. Yeah. So I'm gonna hand it to Rachel.
Overview.
Yes.
So just a quick, and pardon my voice, I lost it completely for 5 days. It's just coming back. So why don't you just check in on the work groups, if work groups met in the interim between the last meeting and this meeting? Can you give us a report? Did any group meet?
I think we just did.
Yeah.
Right. Done your part, I think you're
Look
the
elsewhere.
record. So the short-term action group and
Yeah.
the dredging group, did you meet and do you have, and if so, can you give us an update?
I'm gonna say we did not.
Okay.
So the dredging group had a very quick meeting to vote on the RFI that was issued. We met last week, it was issued last week. We're expecting responses to the RFI Friday. We extended that deadline because only one contractor has expressed interest and they needed more time. So we extended the timeframe for everybody to respond. And it went out to about a dozen contractors, including Charter, who had provided the one dredging bid that we received.
Okay. So I saw that there was a note that maybe if Bert is on. Did Bert have an
is
issue that you?
on.
Yeah,
I'm here.
Okay,
So yeah, I could just let everyone know that Bill and I kind of talked about looking at getting some additional information on the DASH, or the diver assisted suction harvesting. So I think the idea is to try to get some more information on that, and then meet again as a group and get that information into our proposal. That was it.
okay, thank you. Thanks, Bert. Anything else on this topic? Okay, then moving on. The next topic is to go back to Malcolm and Liz about their knowledge, attitudes, and practices study design. They have incorporated feedback from the group into their design and really tried to address the comments that were made. And today is hopefully focused on hearing from them and adding any other improvements or comments to improve the approach, looking at the questions, on, and next steps to move forward with this, or anything else that Malcolm and Liz want to hear from the group. So I'll hand it over to you.
So I guess I'll start. I'm just gonna kind of quickly go through the changes that we made to both the survey design and the questionnaire. And then we have a little bit more in-depth discussion around a few other points that were raised, that Malcolm will bring up. So you had all gotten, this is basically just like an overview of all the stuff, so that was sent out, so. I'll start with the survey design. There are some minor changes, clarifying it's not no action, it's limited action group, and kind of an explanation of that in the background of what the groups are. We had a suggestion to reword what the dredging group is, and we just kind of put that in. The kind of larger bit of feedback that we got around survey design changes, kind of was questioning the basis of the data for the online survey, and also pointed out that despite that there were the results from the survey, but there also was a petition afterwards indicating broad support for keeping the pond as is. So I'm gonna read through how we updated it. It's there, but just to make it, we can all hear. So we've updated this section to say, the only formal study about Warner's Pond was an online survey completed in early February 2023. The response rate was only 2%, with 251 people responding. The study was not designed to provide statistically significant results, but did suggest a leaning amongst respondents to perform dam removal. The relevant data for the task force is that 48% of respondents favored dam removal, while only 33% favored dredging. 14% favored the no action option. 20 to 30% of respondents felt they either did not favor any of the three options or did not have sufficient information to make the decision. EA held 2 informational sessions in March 2023 and May 2023, resulted in community concern, ultimately led to the creation of the Warner's Pond Task Force. So our hope is that kind of captures that feedback. If not, we'd love kind of feedback on that. I think it probably makes more sense to go through everything and then get the group feedback, if that's okay. So then switching over to the questionnaire. There were a bunch of minor edits, grammar stuff, typos, kind of an update of the list of the Concord ponds. We updated there's one of the questions kind of describes the problem. We updated, say, we're filling, the pond is filling with vegetation and sediment, and we remove references to any upstream runoff and any references to the pond filling in entirely eventually. Again, we updated the description of limited action group. And there's a checklist of like, if forced to, which one of these would you prefer, and we did add no opinion there. We updated the description of dam removal to dam removal. There was a sentence about dam removal reverting to a pre something. I don't remember. We updated it to dam removal to restore the riverine system existing prior to dam construction. We were trying to capture better what was happening with dam removal. There are two bigger comments, and hopefully my battery doesn't die before I read what I wrote. Yeah, we talked a bit at the last meeting around that last question we had, trying to like capture the idea of cost and how that might impact people's opinion. So we had a suggestion to update the wording on that question, specifically, obviously removing any reference to like taxes increasing. And so we phrase it as, if you were to learn that your choice will result in additional costs borne by town residents, do you think you would change your choice? In our first iteration of this, we kind of had all the options and listened, and we're asking like, would you change about this? We just got rid of that whole idea because the person we talked to is not gonna, like, we don't really have an idea 100% of cost. Like, how is someone we're asking outside Crosby is gonna have an idea? We just kind of left an open-ended, added like an open-ended, like, you know, can you elaborate? Just try to capture opinions that way about what people might feel about any kind of relationship between costs and what happens. We reworded something after question 5. Question 5 was again the one where asked a yes, no on, or asked to choose out of a specific range of options what they thought would be good for the pond. In the kind of question, in some of the feedback around the survey design, someone suggested it would be useful to understand what people's opinion was based on. And so we had something around like why, so we just made a more specific sort of, could you explain what your decision is based on, just to kind of get an idea of where people are hearing things, what they're hearing from those sources, and what's informing people's thoughts about this. And then the final thing for kind of changes we've made or did not make in the survey, there was a comment on some of the context setting before question 4, which is, I don't have it open in front of me, which is the question, I'm sorry, I wrote myself notes, I meant to print myself stuff out and my printer broke. Question 4.
There you go.
Oh, that's right, that's the general, so not, without forcing people into one of the options, it's the general, what do you think should happen to the pond? We just gave it a little more, we thought giving it a little more context was important. Question 3 kind of high level talks about what's going on in the pond. And then we felt like the context setting in question 4 is giving a little bit more specific about what's happening with the pond. Which we thought would be useful before asking, what do you think? So those are kind of the changes that we've put in. And are open to feedback. And I don't know, do you think it makes sense to get specific feedback first, or?
Yeah, if there's any, I guess if there's any additional feedback.
Yeah, and if the changes that, if you feel like, especially for people who commented, if the changes that we put in, like actually captured what we thought we were supposed to be capturing from it.
And the spreadsheet, I think you sent the spreadsheet out, didn't you? Yeah, I mean, it lists everybody's comments. And, you know, what we did and.
Do we
why-
have this? I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah,
a little
that's-
distracted
that's my
because I'm
first
looking
question.
for, it,
me
because
too.
instead of just listening, I
Uh,
wanted to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It came from Toby. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just looked up Toby survey and I don't find it.
It's part of the note.
Survey.
So what?
It's under meeting material.
Oh, it was sent yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, the meeting materials.
All right, so just like the other report that nobody read since yesterday, maybe nobody had a chance to read.
Well, I remember hearing some, reading some of those changes,
Yeah.
but.
So,
Yeah.
Liz
You know,
and
we
Malcolm,
need
do
more time.
you want feedback at this stage, or is there more you're gonna present that you also want feedback on, just so we can kind of plan the time?
I think, and Malcolm, I think is gonna have the more substantial.
I have 4 questions that I want specific input from the task force on. Toby, you have the slide?
Great, I can put that up, if that's what we want to do now.
How do you feel about
Okay.
doing that also? And
Wait,
then,
there's other questions. Survey.
sorry,
I have other questions too.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
so maybe hearing more. Do you want to hear more, or do you want to have questions?
I think, well, I think, because these are, I think Malcolm's questions are more logistical.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I guess we can do if there's things to talk about with the specific wording
Okay.
types of things. I think
Okay.
that probably makes sense now.
So, all right, so do people have any questions or comments on what Liz has just presented?
I have one comment on it, and it really sort of goes to question 5, where you already asked the person what they think should be done in general, and then said, if you only had these 3 choices, and the answer there is yes or no. But it seemed to me that it might make sense to ask them to rank between the 3 choices, instead say, you know, could you, between limited action.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Stop
it's
the fact,
really, it's
yeah.
really hard to
Sorry.
hear.
So question, between limited action dredging and dam removal, then you put those in your order of preference, might just get more useful sense of what people think.
Can I step back a little bit though, because I missed a very important survey meeting, apparently. And I apologize for that, but I have some basic comments about doing a survey with this task force. One, surveys are so tricky and professional organizations get paid a lot of money to produce surveys that are non-biased. And I think it's very, very hard, especially we have 2 dam removal people on the subcommittee who are producing a survey. It's hard to not produce, it's, from what I know, it's hard to not put bias into a survey. Even for really great professionals. So I'm just throwing that onto the table because it's tricky. We've been doing a great job of keeping things very open between us, and this is a tricky one. Secondly, I worry about the precedent we set by sending out a survey for something that we've already had town meeting for. I'm sorry, Malcolm, I'm
we're
gonna say my
not, we're
whole
not
thing.
sending out a survey.
So what are we doing a survey for?
We're doing, what do you call it? An interviews. No, we're not sending out.
Okay, so I'm concerned about asking people their opinions about something that we had a town meeting for, and they've already voted on a direction, and now we're saying, we're gonna put the town meeting discussion and vote aside, and we're gonna ask something again. It's a really bad precedent, because we could do that for Ellen Garrison, and we could do it for other things that town meeting already voted on, and I don't like the precedent that this task force would set too. The third one is I think Allison was correct. We can only do these questions after we do a public meeting where we share all the information that we all have gathered over the last 9 months. And we answer people's questions before we ask them, which of these, please rank these, because we've got 9 months of information about those items that we have not shared with people. And we're gonna say, please rank something we have not shared with you yet. They came last time almost with torches saying, you didn't give us any information. And now we're gonna say, we're not gonna give you information again. I think it's a really terrible place to be. We have a timing to do another public meeting. Let's do the public meeting, share this great information. We're almost there for sharing, and we're almost there for getting feedback. And let's do that and hear from people about what they think of the work that we've done to date. That's how I feel about just stepping back on doing this questionnaire and interviews.
I was actually thinking about how this came up last meeting. I was a little surprised. I didn't know this was even happening in the last meeting, so I am wondering why this is advancing so quickly. We haven't even voted on it. So I'm thinking that might be a good activity for the task force to consider doing before we commit. Any further action on this?
Well, I mean, that's sort of where it came from. 2 meetings ago, we were like, hey, what do we think about it? So this is like what we put together to present to you guys,
This
say,
group
what do you
discussed
think about it?
this.
So,
We didn't vote on it.
no, but we're, yeah,
Maybe
that's,
we
but
should.
we were trying to give you guys something to vote on, I think, is what's happening.
Yeah,
I think,
I just think it's important to consider doing that before you take this
Yeah.
much farther, that's all I'm trying to say.
yeah,
Malcolm, I thought at the meeting two weeks ago, the two of you sort of raised your thinking as to how this information could be helpful
Yes,
to the task force. Do you want to reiterate that?
Yeah.
Because that would help me.
but I think, what am I trying to say? Uh, we do not have a lot of information to guide us going forward about what the community's feelings are about Warner's Pond. How many people even know about Warner's Pond? What the geographical difference in opinion is about the pond, how important the pond is, how used it is. And I think these are all important issues in terms of how we go forward, regardless of the solution that we choose. Where do people get their information from? What do people feel about the issues that affect them on all of this? We do not have any of that information. We have had a public meeting that was heavily stacked with people from one side with one view. And that's perfectly okay, but we don't have anything that actually looks at the entire population of Concord who are going to be asked to fund whatever we come up with. And I think that it is important that we understand the knowledge, attitudes, and practices of people in the town of Concord about their use of ponds and with a specific focus on Warner's Pond. And it gives us the opportunity to fill in the gaps in knowledge about what things are. And it also gives us the opportunity to know how to get information out to people to be able to make a decision. I don't agree with what you were saying, Vicky, about town meeting met and voted on one thing, because if that was the only thing, what the hell are we meeting in this world? In this task force
Some
for
people would
you?
ask, it's a good question.
Right, but I don't think we can question that at this point, unless you want to question the entire reason for this task force.
But we did have, there was a 1,000-person petition signed at Crosby's, which was on the other side of town. We do have some feeling that people know where Warner's Pond is. They do want to see this task force created because they didn't want to see dam removal pushed forward as it was, because that's the only reason they signed that petition. And we have our obligation written down and shared with the public that we were going to do a public meeting and share our findings. And we haven't done
But
that.
but
Can I add
can I
something?
add here saying this
Wait,
because.
Sten, can I add something? Sorry, just to build off of what Malcolm was saying. I actually, and honestly, you might not agree with me here. I think the timing of this is irrelevant for myself. I mean, it's irrelevant in that, like, we want to do it sooner rather than later, so we have the sense. But if there's a strong feeling that the public meeting should be first, if we're thinking about that in January, and again, I don't see why we can't do this in February. For me, like, I am an at-large member, right? So you're saying, so many people know this, literally every preschool parent that I talk to is like, what are all these Warner Pond signs? I don't understand. So like, there is an element of who you interact with, it's gonna inform like what people, what you think. So like, as an large member, I'm like, I feel like people don't really know about this.
Yeah.
And I think I think that's why for me, I thought this was important because I think all of us are very influenced by the people we're around and spending a lot of our time with. In terms of what we think people think is important. I think that the timing is like, I think there is absolutely an argument for like, yeah, let's give one more, give another option, not option, give another opportunity to get more people in getting the information. But I do think it would be very helpful for me to be able to say, I truly feel like I'm able to understand what an entire community is thinking. And not just like hearing.
So how
No,
about
so
proposed to
wait,
talk?
wait, wait,
So I
wait,
have,
wait.
I have a,
Let's then go.
Okay, I think. So first of all, it's never good to say single out to people and position them in a certain direction. I think that we should not do
I
that.
think
Yeah,
it's hard. I think it's hard what you've been asked to do.
so, second, I think this questionnaire in principle, in philosophy, if I read it through, and I hope everyone read through it, like through our document, is trying to define a baseline, is where the community generally is with familiarities across different ponds, different water bodies, about how they use water bodies and open spaces, what their general interests are. And it's something to put a baseline out there after kind of the emotions settled down in the community. After kind of, there was no strong lobbying in the one or the other direction in recent months, at least not that I'm aware of, that were outspoken kind of massive communications in the one or the other direction. So I read this and my impression was from the discussions we had when we gave these two people the task. Here we discussed this in this task force. We gave them the task to outline this and prepare this. And
they
and
asked
if
for the
certain-
opportunity to do this.
yeah, so we should not single them out for that. We told them to do that. So if you look at this, this is providing the baseline for us to do this. And we're if we don't have a baseline where this is on where our population generally stands and how they look at water bodies, and how they use it, and then just start to do a survey after the lobbying from any side starts again, we are getting a completely full wrong picture and we should not do it at all.
So I have another
Precedent.
comment, actually, that clearly you've spent a lot of work on this and have done a lot. But I was thinking about it a little bit differently. I was thinking that perhaps we have all made now our presentation on dam removal, the no action or some action, and on dredging. We all know that we need another public meeting, and that public meeting will occur January, probably sometime in that time period. What if we were to put together our proposals, like one page a piece, and have it sent out in one mailing to every single household in this town and said, hey, this is the Warner's Pond Task Force. We have 3 proposals. You can read all our proposals. We have the dam removal, we have dredging, and we have a no action, minimal action. This is what we're gonna present to you at the next public forum. Please read this. Please inform yourself as to what we have spent the last year doing. This is what we have come up with. Please review it and kind of basically, if you're interested in coming and participating and sharing your feedback, please come to this meeting or join us online. That way, I think there's no any bias, there's no additional work or whatever. It's just, this is what we have come up with. Townspeople, you all have received a copy. What do you think? What is your input? What do you want to do? We're asking you to come back and
So
talk to us.
you're sending out a huge package.
No, it's not a huge
Yeah.
package. It's 3 pages, 1 page for each presentation, so it's bullet
That
points.
doesn't give you the information people need.
So.
If you read this, like, all the details, sorry,
So if you want more information, good point. If you want more information,
Come to the
go
meeting.
to, come to the meeting or go to, I don't know, maybe put it on the website.
So
Okay, Vicky, go ahead.
So um, I think it's interesting, because what you're saying as a path, I want to go back to, we agreed on criteria of how we're going to base our proposals and how we're going to make decisions in this task force, and this was not anywhere on those criteria. We came up with criteria, we wrote them down, we voted on them, and we agreed to them. This never made the criteria, what the other voting on or questioning or finding out what familiarity is with ponds. That was not in the Envision Concord criteria. It was not in our criteria to familiarity across the town. So that's one thing that would trouble me, is that we're adding criteria and it starts to swing people's opinions, and it comes from places of passion, I know. And I think the extraordinary outreach is interesting. I like outreach, but nobody asked me if I wanted to see Haywood Meadow on the other side of town. Nobody asked me about Millbrook Dam. Nobody asks anybody in it's a funny thing that we are so concerned about resource in West Concord, about what people all across town think about it. We did vote on it, and people all across Concord voted to spend money to dredge it, so that's one thing. But it is extraordinary to me that we're not thinking about what are the people, the 200 households that are gonna move into MCI potentially gonna think about the pond? What are the people who are going to live on Baker Ave going to think about this piece? How do we get those opinions to count, I think, more than somebody who lives across from Haywood Meadow, frankly? It affects them more.
So, I mean, I'm finding this a really interesting and challenging piece of discussion. And I think there's a couple of basic questions, and I do thank you for the work. And I think you're raising the question of trying to figure out what's the baseline understanding of attitudes towards the ponds, and, what preferences is a really interesting question. And if we, frankly, if I thought about it before, it might have been in the criteria, because I think that, assessing the town's willingness and interest to pay for, to be engaged with a certain process, which may take years to unfold, I think is kind of important. So the questions that I think we need to grapple with are, should we do this survey? And what's the timing? And, the very basic timing is, or maybe it could even be done twice, like once, as Sven pointed out, when there's been a relatively quiet period, and one could assume that the average Concordian is not thinking about Warner's Pond or hasn't been thinking about it very much. And then we do some outreach and we try and inform people about what the choices are and all the things that we've learned. And then we say, have we moved the needle on that at all? Does go, because this is, the design here is a person on the street survey where you walk up and try and get somebody to answer some questions. So in theory, it's well told. Now, Vicky, you raise a good point. These things, in order to work, need to be well designed, and I don't have a basis for assessing that or not. Again, I'm not a pollster. So I think we have to ask ourselves, is this the right tool if that's what we want to do? So I think it's completely appropriate to invest time in trying to figure out, what kind of community input do we want to assess the progress we're making. I think it's laudable to want to get our information out in the hands of the public and have people really come back and tell us what they think, or, even how they might prioritize this against something else they might be asked to spend money on.
So I guess I would just interject here. Obviously, there are strong feelings about this. Are you struggling with? So I'm hearing about timing of the survey, about whether to do the survey, more than once, but also, is there fuzziness about the purpose of the survey? And is that I don't know, is there fuzziness about the purpose of the survey? And would clarifying that help anybody in coming to a conclusion about what to do?
Well, I'm gonna say yes, in the sense that I think it's important. If we engage in any activity that, you know, that we understand what the goals of the activity that we're engaging in. So we started off with the subgroups and the proposals because we knew that there needed to be a choice and we wanted to put the choices as best we could on even footing. I think assessing the, you know, community at large's interest in a particular solution or preference, or, you know, how much investment they want to even make, and this is also a useful goal to have. And then the question is, what tools make sense to do that? So, yes.
Going back to the discussion, when, I don't remember if it was the last meeting or the meeting before, but when Malcolm really framed out the idea of the survey and what the purpose could be. Don't quote me, but I remember a sort of a connection between doing the survey and tying that to what kind of education do people need in order to make an informed decision on what, on.
And that is
that.
one reason why we're calling it a CAP study, where we're doing a CAP study. We're not doing a definitive study in terms of, you know, this is the opinion of the town and this should tell us what we need to do. We're looking at the knowledge, attitudes and practices. And as Mark says, you don't do a single CAP study. You have to do at least two, one prior to and one after intervention.
Okay.
I was envisaging when I first raised this, that we need to be able to see how effective our community meeting is, because community meetings are notoriously biased. There's a massive selection bias for public meetings. Those people who feel most strongly go there. People who don't even know that there's an issue don't go. And I love the idea of trying to educate people by sending something out. But we know that probably only about 20, well, extrapolating from the rest of the country, only about 20 people are actually going to read anything we send out to. 20% are going to read anything we send out to them. The rest of it will go into the garbage along with all of their, you know, other stuff that comes out. So I'm not sure that that's a particularly useful way of educating people. But actually, I don't know, because we don't know what people know now. We don't know what they think, and we don't know where they get their sources of information from. And that's, I did try to lay out very explicitly what the objectives were, what the specific research questions are that we had, and I put forward two hypotheses that we will either prove or not prove. I don't care at all if people don't want to do this, but we are the two members at large on this committee. And I think it is our role to represent the entire community. Everybody else here has a jurisdiction. We don't. We represent the citizens of Concord. And, you know, I think we're trying to be responsible to that. And I do object to saying that we are both on the dam removal subgroup. I made an explicit commitment when I joined this task force that I will set aside my personal views when it comes to task force business, and I will operate only on the data that comes forward.
Yeah, so I apologize for that, Malcolm. What I wanted to say is that surveys are notoriously
I know that.
difficult to
I-
put bias
I'm an
aside.
acad-
It doesn't matter, like, and we see it all the time, and it's why there are survey companies that make this their only source of work, is because they know people like me, if I put together a survey, if even if the best intentions, I'm probably gonna show somewhere in there my bias, and we see it at the workplace, we see it in elections, we see it everywhere. It's not you, it's just the nature of writing surveys. It's a art.
And I used to do this as a profession. So I do know something about writing surveys
I
and
understand.
dealing with.
But maybe we
problems.
hire a professional survey company if this becomes an incredible, important thing for the task force.
If we need to hire a professional survey company, we're getting into a whole different area. So
I think you just want to highlight, two things. A, the argument of bias, you can also, and for sure, apply to, let's say, the 1,000 signatures that were collected. Yeah, so therefore, if you argue we should not do that, we should then take the thinking of 1,000 signatures in this trash can and say we are not taking that because it has a bias. Second, you were bringing up kind of that the town voted for dredging. The town voted for $3 million budget that was used to dredging. There was no vote about scenarios.
Is that true? I thought
There
the
was
vote was for
not a
dredging.
vote, is the town for
Funding.
this or is the town for that? It was a budget that was to use for dredging. Since then, most of these things were happening via COVID. But since then, significant new information appeared, which led to the formation of this task force to look into that. So the town and the information that is now available, yeah, there's much more there than what was just put in front of citizens for a single line item budget that was presented. And we have to have that in mind. And there's all things, if you remodel a house, yeah, and you're saying, I'm redoing my bathroom, and suddenly the contractor comes back and you thought it costs 10,000 and he comes back and it costs 60,000. You might go back and say about the scenarios, you might still come back and say, I'm still doing a $60,000 project, but give a break, think about it, revisit with the significant information that was presented. And therefore, that's why we are here. Yeah, if we would insist on the town voted on this and do it no matter what, yeah, we would not be on it. And we could save a lot of
So
time.
I think we're on the same page, Sven. I think we should share the information that we have with the people, because we have new information that has been gathered since they saw and voted. I do think you should know that one of the main reasons the task force was created was because of the 1,000 signatures and that select board meeting. If that hadn't happened, this would have not been happening. So just that did make a difference in putting us at this table. But yeah, I do think you're right. We should share the information with the people who do not have the information that we have. I agree.
I actually agree, but that's not what I said, but nevertheless.
Into the present tense.
Right, right.
Since we are using a lot of our time on this.
So
Go ahead, Malcolm.
can we just decide whether we want to go forward with this thing or
What I
not?
was going to ask.
I don't want to waste any more time. If it is the view of the task force that we don't want to do this anymore. 2 meetings ago, we seemed to want to have this fleshed out. We've done that. Could the task force please give us some instructions?
That would be my ask to the task force too, is they have responded to what the task force asked for previously. And done, presented that information back to you, so this would be the moment to let them know what was expected next. What do you want to do?
I just wanted to clarify, I do realize we gave you the green light to go pursue this. I meant to say was I was a little surprised to see it read like an interview, so I just wanted to clarify. I thought it was gonna be like the previous surveys that had been done prior that were more of like a.
Those have tremendous selection bias.
Right,
And
so I guess I just was, when I said earlier, I skipped over what I was, the detail, I just wanted to say, I just was actually. Trying to process just the format of it and the more of like the question, I was like, why is this like an interview? I didn't quite understand that, so. That was my mistake for not clarifying that.
I for one think that we should make that decision about whether to go forward on it. I also think that it's kind of important for everyone on the task force to really sit with this and think about the implications. To say it out loud for anybody who's hasn't seen these documents and might be watching this or listening right now. The idea, the concept, if I get it right, is to actually do a survey in which people are selected at random. You know, the design that's been put forward is, you know, an interviewer approaches them on the street and asks them if they can answer a few questions and then tries to get some information which will then be compiled. And so that, you know, clearly that's an attempt to try to make sure that the selection bias that goes into, you know, when people self-select to answer a survey is removed, and an attempt to apply enough objectivity to that for us to be able to rely on that data. Sitting where I sit, you know, in the select board and thinking about the process steps down the road, you know, if a group was able to come with some actual data that was reliable, that said, you know, we started at this baseline understanding of this particular issue. We did these activities around community outreach and presentation and solution development, and then, you know, down selected this issue because, and we went out and saw that people had an increased awareness and a preference. You know, and it's a relevant population. I think that that's an extremely powerful thing to be able to do if that is achievable for us. And so, you know, I think there's some merit in pursuing that idea. So my suggestion would be that we, you know, consider that strongly, try and think about whether this is the right tool or whether there might need to be a handoff or something to enhance it. And then, you know, maybe come back to that and think about the timing. I appreciate, and I didn't pick up on the notion that this was something that might be done more than once. So that's new information for me right now.
So how would you suggest, Mark, that we move forward?
Well, I think that,
If
you know,
we're sitting on it and thinking about it.
yeah, clearly, you know, some of us haven't read this in detail. And might have some suggestions. I think there's value in being deliberate about that. So I would suggest a future discussion. I also know, I feel like we're missing at least 3 members at this point, right? So, you know, they haven't had the benefit of this discussion. And so I would suggest that we adopt, you know, maybe discussions that are aimed towards, okay, let's get specific. Do we think this tool might work? What are any proposed improvements that would be there? And then make a decision. And I want to thank Liz and Malcolm for the work they put in, because they've clearly raised something which may contribute to our overall output.
Yeah, I can, I think that a little something, because I actually read it, when I got it yesterday. Because I've been very interested in this, and I think they really were able to take out some of the biases that we thought were leading from the last time, and sort of left it open-ended, so that through that interviewing process, or through really sort of scripting it, because that was the big piece of scripting it, so that everybody was doing it the same way. And one of the things is they let it just sort of flow, so people can actually answer the questions in a way that, the way they understand it, because if they do it in downtown Concord on the other side, they could be getting people from downtown Concord or from West Concord. They don't know who they're getting and where they're from when they initially start this out. So I think that plays out a huge part. And then vice versa, when you're basically going back and forth, and I think it's the baseline information. I think as I'm sitting here listening, it almost sounds like they shouldn't do anything else with it at this point. Because we don't want to waste their time, right? We should give everyone, like Mark was saying, the opportunity until the next meeting to just really look it over and really put a time limit of like a half an hour or whatever. Like it's been a half an hour, we're already over half an hour just on this portion of it. Just to be able to come back, have some quick discussion and then decide yes or no. I'm not a voting member, so it doesn't, I'm not gonna be voting on this, but I think it sort of makes sense of, there was a lot of work put into it, a lot of work put into the second round of it. And really, sending them back to say, oh, look at it again, doesn't make any
That's not fair,
sense.
yeah.
And it's not fair. Where, especially because not a lot of people have actually read it. And they really need to really look at it, read it, because it doesn't come with just the survey.
Right.
It comes with all the justification of the survey and why the questions and really understanding that. And I know that, the public meeting is gonna inform all kinds of things. And so if it's done beforehand, maybe it's done on the way into the meeting for the people who come, but then you have bias. Because the people coming to the meeting are only the ones who are interested in it, because the whole town's not gonna be interested until we see price tag. Let's be realistic, there's reality to that. Or is it that survey starts to raise people's interest? We don't know, right? We don't know. So here's some other unanswered questions. So, I can't make a recommendation well, I can make a recommendation, but I can't vote on it. So I think it's like, we basically table it for now.
Okay.
No more work done on it for now. People read it and we come back to the next meeting, right at the beginning after public comments, maybe go into getting this figured out one way or the other. So we know all of it.
Yeah, I think fair enough. We've had a long discussion about this. We've talked about it. I think we've gained some more insight as to what's what, and, I would vote to table it. Go back and take a look at it and, and bring it up for another half-hour discussion at our next meeting and vote on it.
I think, I don't know, I think it would be worthwhile to at least mention the 4 kind of logistical things that Malcolm was gonna bring up, so that way you also have
Oh,
that
sorry.
as
You were
you're
off in the middle of your
thinking about,
That's fine.
if that's okay with everyone.
Yes, I think that makes sense.
If people can note this, and I'll send my little crib sheet out. I had 4 things based upon, in part, the feedback we got from people, and I think only 3 people gave feedback.
And some of it was from feedback from the discussion.
But the first is the sample size. There's a huge issue around logistics of this. I made the initial sample size calculation based upon a 10% margin of error. That obviously is inappropriate for this. I would much rather have a 5%. Again, we're not doing a study in which we're going to be making decisions about. So we're really not looking for, this percentage does, sorry. But we are looking for something that gives us information about people, and as such, I think we don't want to go down to a 2% margin of error, mostly because that requires over 2,000 respondents. But a 5% margin of error gives us more like 350, 400. That's still a tall order, but it's better. And for those who don't understand margin of error, the simple thing is that if you've got a 10% margin of error, there's no difference between 50% and 70%, basically. And that's, you never hear that on the polls when it says, President Trump is 0.5% more than Kamala Harris. They don't tell you that is absolutely meaningless, which it is. It doesn't mean anything. So that's an important point, and think about that, because it affects one of my other questions, which is how many data collectors do we want if we're gonna have a 10% margin of error and 96 data collectors. That's pretty easy. I don't want to, but I could go out and do that myself. But if we're gonna go higher, we need help. I personally don't want to be going out and asking the questions. I think it would be much better to have independent data collectors. And David actually, I don't know if David's still online, but David actually offered some scouts as data collectors, so I think that would be great.
Oh, and the Girl Scout, right?
Oh, and the
I
Girl
didn't think about
Scout
that.
side too, yeah. So just how do we go about that? How many data collectors do we want? Do we try and do this all in one day? Do we spread it over a period of time? Do we do data collection during weekdays, or do we do it over weekends? Weekdays obviously leaves out people who go to work. Weekends, they have their own biases as well. And to do the whole thing in one day means that you only get that one day sample of people who are out and about. It should be spread over more than one day, I think, to get a more representative sample. And the next is a purely logistical question in terms of, I have the stuff to be able to do quantitative analysis, but I don't have a license for the qualitative analysis. And I wondered if the town has a license with Envivo or, Atlas TI or.
I'll look into it. I don't know.
Because it's, I mean, we could just do, I would rather use a proper piece of analytical software rather than just having me look at it and say, oh, there seems to be a trend here or a trend there in people's thinking, because then that does introduce my bias, and that's not okay. Also, I mean, I have these written down, so I'll send them out as well, so you can look at it.
Was there a last point?
No, that was 4.
Oh, that was good.
It was sample size, data collectors, location, and
Okay.
software.
Yeah, location was the one I missed.
And how many days?
Well, location, sorry, yes, location and timing.
Location and time. Mhm.
Yeah,
All
I had data collectors, resources, how many, who, when, where.
I think we can wrap this now.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
And let's move on to our last
Yes, thank you.
couple of items.
All right, so the next item on our agenda is task force member topics of interest and next steps. So we had a couple of things we kind of know that we wanted to bring up around our future timeline, and how we're gonna handle public input at the public workshop, right? So we want to talk a little bit about that. There was also a question around getting a cost estimate for Fish Passage that I think you might want to talk about. So Fish Ladder or other approach, since that's not sort of explicitly in any work group, any one work group's set of responsibilities, but we thought it could be important to talk about. And then just so those are two that we had kind of thought of in advance. Are there others that anyone needs to bring up or wants to bring up today before we delve into these? Okay, so on the timeline, this, as a planning team, we met earlier this week and spoke a little bit about sort of what we were thinking, and wanted to run this by you all and see what people think, and just how we want to move forward. So first thing is, we heard earlier that the dredging work group, is extended their deadline for that RFP till the end of this week to get the cost estimate on the dredging. So we don't expect, or we can't know that that information will be available by the time of our December fifth meeting, as currently scheduled. So we were thinking it could be really nice, to have that information when we meet next. We can discuss it. It could be kind of an opportunity to really get our proposals in close to final, from all three work groups in close to final shape, right? That's one of the key big outstanding item that is preventing us from having kind of a bow around the three alternatives. So we wanted to propose, first of all, let me just walk through these and we can talk about kind of the specifics. Rescheduling that December 5th meeting to the week after, or the week after. And then at that December meeting, the goal would be for work groups to finalize proposals, right? Tie up any loose ends, right? With the large group as needed. And then we'd have some more discussion. We might come back with sort of a more fleshed out proposal for what the public meeting could look like, right? And maybe get others who are interested in working more on the plan for the public meeting, step forward and be part of a team that helped put that together. Then we'll obviously have the holidays. In the January meeting, we could present to the group a plan for the public meeting. And you know, we get input and ideas for that in December, present something more fleshed out and clear, get final comments on that. And then in addition, this suggestion that Chris had earlier around a mailing, a brochure to raise awareness for the public meeting that has a very high level summary of the three alternatives, like what we can fit on one page in a brochure per alternative, but then of course directs people to the website, encourages them to come to the meeting to further raise awareness about the meeting, give people a sense of what's going to be presented. So one option is we could prepare those brochures, and if there's a role that you all want CBI to do to kind of compile that and put a draft of those brochures to you, if it's not something that work groups, an additional task you want to take on, we're happy to do that. So that could be an option. We'd review those brochures in January and prepare to send them out, and then we'd have our public meeting in late January or early February. And as we've talked about, the purpose of the public meeting would be to share our proposals in more detail and have an opportunity to hear reactions from the public on those proposals, right? And with cost information included, right? So they'll be really full proposals. We'd show them what we've done and get their input. And then after that, and potentially, I think this also depends a little bit on sort of the survey, right? If we're going to do that, we want to kind of have all that information, what we learned from the public meeting, if we're doing a public survey, what we learned from the survey. And then our next step as a task force is going to be deliberating, right? So we'll then be evaluating these different criteria, these different proposals against the criteria, building, consensus to the extent we can, trying to arrive at what we think our recommendation should be, what elements of different proposals we want to combine, if that's the direction we want to go in, right? So what does our package of recommendations look like? So after we get this information, that's going to be kind of the next set of meetings to try to finalize a set of recommendations and evaluate what we've then come up with. We'll have the idea is we'll have all the data at that point, right? So that's the plan. That's a suggested plan. I think we want to pause and maybe talk about this overall, and then there's some specific questions around dates, if this is what we want to do. So great, Sven.
Yeah, just one way. So the dam removal task force just put out a 31-page document. It's still draft, but close to final.
Yeah.
And how the proposal is.
Mm-hmm.
When do the other two groups prepare the same document? Because this is along the template that was requested for every task force to be filled, so that we have like the same status of work across all three task forces. When do we have it? Because before, my feeling is before we don't have the same status between the three task forces, we can't summarize it really in 3 slides. And we can't go in a public hearing. So when do we get to equal level?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a good, I think I agree, like, we should have that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, just looking around the room, I think folks agree, right? And that could be in advance of the public meeting, right? That should clearly, you know, if we're putting a package together, it needs to be informed by a full proposal. So this, I think, is really a question to the other work groups, right? When do you, is this timeline realistic for you, right? Could you potentially be close to finalizing by, you know, in a place where after the December meeting, you get your input and then have something finalized, right, in advance of the January meeting, right?
Those will have
We have
costs.
a lot of ours
Cost is
basically
the
done
biggest
anyway.
holdback. Seems to be the biggest holdback, and I know that with, you know, with the dredging group, it's like we're close enough that once we have the cost, we can then put a dollar amount or an estimated, we have to be real clear, it's an estimated dollar amount, right? To what we get back from information. When we get back the information, it's been extended, so it's then, you know, what are our next meeting date for us to really sort of start applying that and how we want to apply it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not 31 pages.
Well, it's a template. It's a
I know,
template.
just-
It's filling the template and the pages fill itself.
I know.
A bunch of pages are the criteria.
Yeah, I mean, we
criteria.
basically filled out the
Does,
template.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's a few more things we need to add in. We need to get the cost estimate, but we are basically in a pretty good.
Because we got our feedback and we.
And we need costs to filled in too, and then we have some of that, and then questions, Mark, on your.
Yeah, we started with the template, so we've been kind of working with it all the way along.
Right.
Again, we are also looking at, you know, what some of these elements might cost to try to understand them and flesh them out a little bit, but the timeline seemed reasonable to me to, you know, to be able to have something close to final for December, and then I think the best thing to do is for each group to put forward what they have, and then for us to sort of say, are they, as long as they're all at roughly the same level of specificity, I think that's close enough for where we need to be at this point.
But are we gonna have time to review them, make sure we're all right? I mean, right, we have to be able to give our comments and say,
Right.
you
Yeah.
didn't, I didn't see you include the Commonwealth Pier, I don't know what, you know, whatever we're gonna
Right,
say to
right.
even these out, like.
Yeah.
Right, from the
We have to. be
Because you
able to
guys
get
really
that
have
stuff
had an opportunity to present twice.
in. Right, right,
You know, your
Mhm.
first time was really more for a little more guidance and
Yeah.
whatnot.
yeah, cause we had three options
Right.
then, so we narrowed it to one. yeah.
Right.
So I guess a specific question seems to be like, can we have the completed template document sent out in advance of the next meeting by every group, assuming that we get the cost information sort of in early December, so there's a, you know, some notice. to-
Is that realistic?
I think if we push back December 5 to, you
December
know,
10th.
to the 12th or the 19th or something like that, then I think that's pretty reasonable last month.
Right, well, so we extended the deadline from today to Friday for the request for information for the dredging alternatives. It'll take about a week to get that approved in terms of, you know, getting the award issued. And then it will be about a 3-week turnaround, so I think it's a much more complicated than the dam removal.
Yeah.
It's a lot more conceptual, there are 3 alternatives, so it's, you know, about a 3-week turnaround, I would estimate.
So we're a
Which
month
puts us in
away.
the week of December 16th,
Mhm.
for the next meeting, but I would suggest maybe the task force wants to consider, you know, that with the survey, or I know it's not called a survey. But with what, I can't remember, it's the knowledge, attitudes, and, don't remember the P.
A cap study.
Okay, CAP study. Maybe, you know, I think Mark's suggestion was a good one to have people just be able to sit on it, evaluate, you know, understand the document a little bit more, but maybe, we could meet on just that study a week from today or sometime next week. Just solely to have that as an agenda item for the task force, and it could just be a virtual meeting if people, I know we're having a lot of meetings, but then, you know, that November 20th or somewhere thereabouts. And then the meeting where everybody has their finalized proposals. And we have our cost estimate from hopefully a contractor on the dredging alternatives. We could meet during the week of December 16th.
But then we were supposed to then review each together, rate the criteria. Right, we said we were all gonna be as a
Right.
group,
Could be in that
rate each
meeting.
proposal against the
That's right.
criteria.
yeah.
So
So that's
just
gonna
to,
take a whole meeting.
just to be
That's the
clear, what
deliberation
we're
process.
proposing,
After all
yeah.
of this.
yeah.
Oh, I thought
Yeah.
before we go into the public meeting that we're gonna have that chart, because we've already filled in our chart, but we haven't done it together. Like,
Right.
you're gonna accept our yeses and nos, or is the task force gonna?
I think that's a good question about what's the level of presentation at a public meeting, whether this is, these are the ideas that, you know, that have been batted around. This is the information that's been collected on each of these alternatives, sort of putting it out there so that hopefully other people in the community have a chance to get the thinking so far without actually saying, and the task force is recommending this. I think it's, I think the next public session is more, these are the options that the task force is going to consider
Yeah.
to the level that we've developed them so far. What do you think of this? What have we missed? Is there, you know, that kind of thing?
Because the whole point is to get the feedback.
Yeah.
But we're not,
Yeah,
it's
so
not finalized
So in a way,
yet.
we should not post our yeses and nos chart
I think
to be
that's,
public, right? Because then it's like, we've already done it, but we haven't all done it
But
together.
we
I think
only
you can
done
look
it
at it as a draft,
between
but-
our three
Yeah,
scenarios.
But your
we're
public,
like
will you
hitting-
know that?
I feel like each group
No, you're not.
is saying like how they think their proposals are hitting each one.
Yeah.
And so I think all of them, it's important for, I think it's
Yes.
important for us all to understand, like
Okay.
if someone has pushback about how we think we hit
Mhm.
something, it's really important to know now, so we
Yeah,
can
yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of be like, oh, we were wrong here. We have to dig back into this. So I
But when
think
are we
it's,
gonna talk about that?
So
In
just
this-
to-
I mean, I think
in
this was when
timeline,
we should have
yeah.
talked about it,
Yeah.
like when we
But
had
we
our.
didn't.
So just to be clear, what we're
That's true.
proposing, this
Fair enough.
proposal, this proposed timeline is suggesting is that yes, we have gotten sort of each individual work group's take on how they're meeting the criteria, right? Those will be up on the website, but that is not the opinion of the task force, right? The task force is gonna do an evaluation approach, right? Where we are gonna all, you know, on our own and then together talk about how these proposals meet or don't meet the different criteria.
And when
that's
is
gonna
that? Sorry,
inform-
when is that?
So the idea is that that group discussion
Mhm.
would happen after the
meeting.
public meeting.
Okay.
Because we want the opinions of the public and how their reactions to what we put forward
Mhm.
to inform that deliberation, right? Or else we're getting like,
Mhm.
we're getting it backwards, right? We don't want to decide before we've actually heard from people, right? So that's kind of after the last bullet that says after that, right? Task force members, task force meetings, consider feeding feedback from the public, evaluate alternatives, and decide on recommendations, right?
Okay.
So,
Does that make sense to
Yeah.
everybody?
Mhm. Yeah.
so it sounds like overall, this feels like workable, like we agree, we want to postpone December, late January, early February, probably a time for the public meeting. Overall, what we're asking for in these meetings seems reasonable, including getting final, proposals or like a complete proposal that's written up for everyone in advance of the December meeting, so we can all review and discuss those as a group, right? Just want to check in.
Do we have a complete thing before the December meeting without the? I mean, if the numbers aren't coming in until December 16th or whatever it is. Can we have a full report from you already formatted, ready to review?
I suppose we could and then put in the cost.
Put in the numbers at the last
Without
second.
No,
cost,
we
but
wouldn't
like what
Send it
everybody's
out yet, but we would have our,
Mhm.
I would rather not send it out without the cost.
No, right. I'm just
So,
wondering if it's,
yeah.
we're just squeezing too tight, like
Yeah.
we're doing down to a day now.
It feels tight. But I think we need to try to keep things moving
Okay.
as well, so, you know, we're gonna have to evaluate in the face of reality as it goes.
I'm just looking there, because they're the ones who are gonna have the
Right.
tightest
Right.
turnaround.
It could also be released without the numbers,
Yeah.
because the numbers won't change anything in the proposal. They're just going to be numbers that are added into, you know, obviously they will be helpful to understand and will inform. But I don't think anything in the proposal itself would change without those numbers, do you?
I don't think so.
I mean, we can look at it again.
Mhm.
Okay.
I guess we could evaluate it that day too, if it feels like it's not ready, then we'll know,
Yeah.
right?
I think it's better to get it out earlier.
Ken,
So it sounds like we're looking at the week of the 16th. We're saying, okay, so just to kind of make that concrete. I don't think we want to push it to the next week, given the holidays. And like we're less likely to know we're gonna have
I can't
the
do that.
cost information.
I can't do that Thursday.
Okay,
It would be before the.
okay, that's helpful to know. So yeah, any other known conflicts that week, so we can try to,
Well, it's
Schedule around that.
meets on Monday night.
Public Works meets on a Wednesday.
So it sounds like Tuesday.
and we have a winner, okay.
Just
Great.
make sure, hang on, let me just make sure this room's available.
Mhm.
Oh, geez, make it happen.
Wednesday night meeting.
So what is that?
17th,
Sunday, 17th.
The Tuesday,
yeah.
assuming planning board is virtual. Planning board meets on Tuesday, the 17th, but assuming that they're virtual and they are typically,
Mhm.
and then I can also check with Harvey Wheeler. They don't post their availability online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, so we'll get that confirmed, but it sounds like tentatively, that's when we want to make this happen. The other question, this is an interesting idea, Delia, I think you were suggesting, could we just have like a hour online meeting or something to specifically deal with the cap study question after people have all had a chance to review it, the purpose being, if we wanna move ahead with that, maybe we wanna do that like before, January, basically, which is what we'd be doing if we push it to the December meeting.
Right.
Right, so what do people think about that idea? This would be online meeting within the next few weeks, I guess, right? But with a simple agenda item of like just reviewing the cap study and discussing it.
I guess I would ask you guys, how do you feel about that?
I'll do whatever the task force asks us.
But I mean,
to
as
do.
far as timing, does that,
They're the only ones that don't have to do any work for that.
I know.
Yeah, I think it's based on like whenever y'all think you can
Yeah.
get the most, have time to give feedback. So
As
that's
long, as
actually
long,
productive.
as long as we have 3 weeks to actually collect information, and another week to, I mean, depending on your feedback, 3 weeks would be the longest, like 3 weekends or
Right.
whatever.
Actually,
Before the January meeting, yeah, no problem.
if you go to the public meeting in late January, you could pull that off.
Yeah, which would be,
Which is if it just went into the beginning.
It's gotta be late.
yeah, I'll skip Christmas.
Yeah, we have Christmas.
So, Malcolm, is it said that we don't need that meeting or that you think it'd be helpful, an online extra? meeting?
I think as whenever people are comfortable getting feedback to us, that would be great. If it's too difficult or people don't want to meet prior to the 16th, then not the 16th, the 17th.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't mind.
Yeah.
Whatever.
You're just gonna wait anyway.
So I just put this to the group. What do you guys want to do? You want to do this online meeting or just wait till December 17th?
Well, I'm just wondering, so the survey relies on some special software to crunch the numbers, right? So we figure out
Only,
first-
no, I mean, the number crunching will just be done to an add-on in Excel, which I own. And the special software is for the open-ended questions. Because you need to be able to classify the open-ended answers in a particular way to make them meaningful.
Well, should we find out first if that's even available? If that's gonna be something that's required with Polisol?
I can, if it's not available, I can probably steal it from BU. For a few days. Sorry, I will call in some favors. at
It's a
BU.
graduate student.
It's a
Those
great-
are their project.
If the cap study isn't discussed at a virtual meeting, then the discussion would be pushed to
The December 17th meeting
For the
so it'd be
first
an
time.
additional.
for the first,
Yeah.
It would be an
It's gonna be an
additional
additional-
agenda item. Okay.
yeah, yep. So to be clear, we're happy to go either way. I think we just want your input. What do you all want to do?
Sounds like
Malcolm,
we're
I'm
waiting.
thinking about the
Yeah.
predictive back.
Could do either, but if there's no rush on the survey, and if we think by the 17th, we'll be able to have a crisp
I
conversation.
think, yeah, we need a decision one way or another by the 17th
Yeah.
or on the 17th.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
I mean,
Fair enough.
if it gets pushed and pushed and pushed, then forget about it.
Okay.
I think we've had a robust discussion tonight,
Yeah.
so.
I do also just want to be conscious, you all have put in a lot of time, right? So if we don't need an extra meeting, we
Yes,
can not
yeah,
do it. Okay.
that's a good point.
Okay, and then we want to get any more details on kind of the date, or just say late January, early February, we'll decide.
I just
Okay,
want to
next
remind
meeting.
everyone, school vacation week is gonna be that week of February 17th, which I know is later
Mhm.
than early February, but in case things slip, I
Okay.
think that's just a good thing to remember.
Okay, great.
Can I just ask that we don't put the bit about me stealing chocolate?
Now it's their twice, Malcolm.
I don't remember anything about
No,
that.
as I said, I will call in some favors,
highlight it.
ex-colleagues.
Okay, so great, we'll talk about the specific date, it won't be February 17th,
Just
right?
want to throw
before
it out
that.
there before I.
But we can nail that down at the next meeting, maybe we can do a little looking at what else is going on in town, or maybe share that with you when we meet in December. Okay, there was one other thing, right, we want to talk about the fish
Toby,
passage.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
on the idea of getting
Yeah.
these, we were talking about a brochure, something
Yeah,
that
yeah,
would
yeah.
get information out to people. I don't know, like, it could be timely to talk with somebody at the bridge, and just say, hey, could we get 2-page
Mhm.
spread or something? I mean, it already goes out.
Oh, That's the
There-
easiest way.
Part of their
Yeah.
charter is
That's a good
to
idea.
spread information in the
Yeah.
community,
Good
so
idea.
Yeah,
that would be one way to get it to every household.
And then we have to figure out, like, it should be, I don't know if it's you, or I don't know how we do it, but it should be the exact same information for each one.
yeah,
Like a ballot.
yeah,
Yeah, kind of like that, right, because
Yeah.
it's hard to evaluate if one has, I don't know, square
Yeah,
footage and
yeah,
one
we'll
has
have-
doesn't, and
we'll
one
need a
has
mini-
depth
yeah.
and one doesn't,
Right,
it's like,
right.
then we haven't given them enough information to make a right decision.
Yeah.
It feels off.
yeah.
So somebody's gotta figure that out. What is what are it's almost like the facts that need to be had with each scheme.
So I think, well, very, very important point. I think, if this is something you want, sort of uniformity, definitely, we can help with that and get input on what exactly we want to go in that, right, when we talk in December. It's a good point.
You'll get a different piece of information from each of these groups and then.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else on the pieces that you see on your screen here, the timeline? On to the next piece. All right, so the fish passage cost estimate, so this basically just, we were talking in the planning team and realizing like we're getting numbers attached with everything. This isn't something that is owned by any one work group because it's both the short-term actions group and the dam removal group that are including a fish passage dredging, excuse me, element in our proposal. There is, there could be opportunities just to get like a ballpark estimate. Maybe we talk to Brad Chase, right? And just get a general sense, right? Not paying for a design or anything, right? But I think we just wanted to put that to the task force. Do we agree that it'd be helpful for the planning team to go out and try to get that info? Yeah.
But if it's part of the proposal of any of the task force, there
Mhm.
should be a cost estimate.
Yes.
So in that sense, if it's part of two, it should be there. If it's part of one, it should be there.
Yeah,
If it's part of none, we don't need to do it.
right.
But it's part of these two.
But it is part of these.
So
And Brad
part
Hayes
of
had an
the-
idea,
so,
right? He
yeah.
saw it, he
You're
had
right,
an
yeah.
idea of how to do it.
I don't think it's that important until we get down to the evaluation, if we can just sort of, frame that we're getting it, so is there an issue with getting a cost?
Julie, do you wanna chime in on this?
Well, everything comes with a cost.
Yeah.
Like, getting a cost comes with a cost,
Right.
unless it's something that, I don't know, the Brad Chase, who is the other person at DMF? Brad Chase and
Stephen Maddox.
Stephen Maddox.
Yeah.
Stephen
Right.
Maddox.
Mass Wildlife,
Mass
yeah.
Wildlife.
He said that that was not his area of expertise and referred back to Brad.
okay, so then Brad
The guy.
maybe would have those, and if we could get those costs from, Brad Chase, who
Yeah.
has, knowledge of the dam, I think that would be the best approach.
I mean, he might be able to give
Um,
us an estimate.
Well, let's try to get that. I guess what I was saying is that, if I didn't have that number in hand until January or something like
Yeah.
that, it wouldn't.
Don't let it hold us up.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I just
Yeah.
ask, there seems to be, from what I've heard from different people, fish passages that work and fish passages that don't, and can we get an estimate for one that works?
Oh, good.
So forceful.
Yeah.
The other approach,
That would be the hope.
other than going out seeking quotes or something like that, is like we have that wealth of information from Sumco about. So Brad could say, oh yeah, this is a design we like,
Mm.
did one in
Mhm.
Westfield or whatever. Maybe we could.
I
get
thought
some
he had made a
numbers or something.
recommendation,
Yeah.
having seen the dam, that he would have done.
Well, he talked about, like a rock ramp
Yeah,
type
yeah.
thing. He thought
He
that
thought that could work.
there was the horizontal distance given the vertical distance to create something.
Right.
I would say while we're talking about that letter, that folks have raised that as like, Brad Chase says the best thing to do would be a rock ramp, but the letter, which I have here, I was looking at, he was agnostic.
Mm.
I don't think he was asked about dam removal. He was asked whether a rock ramp would be possible.
But that's what we're
And he
asking
said,
him for
yeah,
here, right?
yeah,
What
so
we're-
It would be good to ask him. It seems to be his expertise.
So it sounds like
We agree.
what you agree, we should check in with
Yes.
Brad, we'll get back to, come back to the group with
Yeah.
what we hear. We'll specify we want a fish passage that works. Um, Here we go. All right. So those are all the items we had, and you want to check in any other items of interest from the task force before we press forward? Okay, all right, so Chris, I'll hand it back to you for.
Okay, so we're at the time again for public comment. Do we have, I already kind of really said the rules before, be kind, no personal attacks, keep it to no more than 2 minutes. Do we have any public comments for Miguel?
We do have a couple online. if you
Miguel
want.
Chavari, 255 Commonwealth, the hour's working, I can see. I want to add my perspective onto the whole survey from the community's perspective. And I'm kind of feeling like the town meeting process is kind of being devalued. In the way you guys are looking at it. I mean, we self-govern ourselves. Concord, we've got the 250th coming on up. And we had a town meeting vote, where we voted $5 million to purchase the land at Giroux. I think you were involved in that. To purchase the land at Giroux and to build a park. And we did that to have a park on the water, okay? And then as part of that, we also voted through several appropriations, another around $3 million in order to restore the pond that the park is on, okay? And we decided to do that by dredging. Now, the only reason that was not implemented was that we were told in no uncertain terms that dredging was too expensive. All right, so that's why dredging didn't happen. Now, that came about, that's what brought the dam removal around. And at that point, no one was really asking this community, us, what our feelings were about that. Okay, they were just pushing it right forward, right, they were pushing it. So then we had to do 1,000 signature petition. All right, now, first of all, our town government is not supposed to work that way. We're not supposed to do a town meeting vote and then have to supplement it with a petition. Okay, but that's what we had to do. All right, so I kind of want to add perspective on this because now it seems like it's just the people who are concerned about the pond that are showing up to these meetings and showing passion about it. So now we need to do a survey because, not enough other people are expressing enough of an interest or trying to make an input. So you guys have done incredible amounts of work. God knows why the heck you guys do it. I couldn't do it. But you guys still have to go through a lot of data, a lot of technical data. You guys got decisions to make. I just, to me, it's a little infuriating You know, that we had the town meeting, we voted for it, we didn't do dredging. We had to do a petition, and that's all belittled a little bit. And now we have to do a survey to accommodate, because the only people showing up are the people, that have a passion for the pond. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I think we have a couple people online. We have, I just see
Are
one.
we, are we waiting? Hello, should I introduce myself?
Yes, please.
Okay, Lorraine Armenti, lived in West Concord 60 years with my family. I now live in Ashland. I live across from the reservoir in Ashland. And I skated, swam, extensive walking across this property you're discussing. And we moved in when Wright Road was a piggery, if anyone wants to go back that far. The proposal, I've heard it discussed in 3 different meetings, and the title is Dam Removal Proposal. But too much of it is trail construction discussion. It's distracting, and it's overwhelming the issues having to do with the ecological health. Can somebody, yeah. So it's obscuring the issue of the ecological health of this property. The trail is expensive, it's lengthy, it is very frustrating to hear so much attention put on new construction when the issue is that the pond is being strangled by invasives, by endangered species, the invasive plants, the various turtles, etc., Native Americans. The dam removal proposal should focus on the dam removal issues. That's my opinion. It's just not coming across about what the problems are. Now, there's across Massachusetts, there are, I don't know the number, but there are lots of projects that are very beautifully photographed. The remediation across the United States of dams are gorgeous, with culvert work and dams having to do with environmental issues. So those photographs would really help to articulate what the environmental issues here are of these industrial era infrastructure that's deteriorating. And I think so I'll just leave that alone for now. And just as an observer, I'm just not hearing a dam removal proposal. I'm hearing new construction for other projects not having to do with the health of Warner's Pond. And this, my last point is that the trails without management and oversight, my experience here in Ashland with the reservoir is that it attracts dogs. What you'd be creating is a giant dog park without supervision, without controls, without Audubon to manage it. You'd have trash, which comes wherever there are people, and you'd fragment the really a very tight space that's surrounded by housing and having teenagers drinking behind houses on Comm Ave. So those are my concerns. I appreciate your time, and I really appreciate all the work you're putting into this. Just want to warn you about Project Creep. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mari, please.
It's Mary Weinberg, Hillside Avenue, West Concord. In closing, Dealey stated that streams are dynamic systems. Streams are dynamic systems. We can't guarantee where they're going to flow. I'm a dynamic system. As a 45-year resident, I want to see the ponds reflective waters as they are. And town meeting voted and paid $2.5 million for in 2018. What was shown in tonight's presentation changes our pond. Please join me this Sunday, November 17th at Giroux Park, 3 to 4:30 to watch the sunset's reflection in the pond's still waters. To understand why, in this case, less pond is not more, less is less. The more is the unnecessary time and huge monetary expenses we taxpayers are spending on this effort to change our pond. I ask you, come with an artist's eye this Sunday to see and feel the beauty of Warner's Pond waters bestow. And again, this is for the reflection. You will see if you come, and it will really, it's a fantastic stress reliever to just focus on the pond, the reflection of the sun. And when you go during the day, there's a reflection of the clouds. So for all artists to come, and I want you all, I ask you all, turn into an artist on Sunday and let's get together
Okay.
and look at the pond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay,
Thanks, Mary.
Adelia.
Can I just make a clarifying comment about, we've heard a couple of times about the 1,000-person petition that was received. I've never seen that 1,000-person petition. I saw it when it was, I think it was 600 signatures when it was submitted to the select board. And, you know, not all of those signatures are from Concord residents. Not all of those signatures are from people of voting age. So I think it's important to just be clear about that, that it's 1,000-person. I'm not sure what the actual number is, but it's not something that's ever been, you know, really evaluated for how that petition was garnering support. You know, whether there was any sort of, well, I guess I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Mind. All right, with no further comments, right? The meeting is adjourned at, wow,
Right on time.
8:57.